Hello guys, welcome back to my channel. As you can see in the picture today, let's start the story of what if Izuku got harem with class 1A and 1B. Izuku Midoriya sat dejected on the bench overlooking the park. His shoulders hunched and his eyes downcast as he tried to keep his mind clear of the thoughts and feelings that had been clawing at him the entire day. I shouldn't cry, he thought to himself with a pained sigh as he attempted to restrain a sob from escaping his mouth for the umpteenth time that day. I shouldn't give them the satisfaction. The day had started out so well. In fact, if he was honest with himself, this whole week was going so well for him. Too well, actually, that should have been Izuku's first sign that his world was going to crash around him soon enough. I guess I shouldn't be surprised, Izuku said to himself as he leaned back against the bench, ignoring the sight of families enjoying the spring afternoon around him. I mean, who would have wanted to be in a relationship with Midoriya, my boy? A deep voice broke Izuku out of his thoughts as a towering figure entered his view. She was thin and gaunt, almost skeleton-like, that made her look even taller than she was as she moved closer to him carrying an ice cream cone in each of her hands. I'm sorry it took so long. It seems like everyone in the park decided to get ice cream at the same time. It's no problem, All Might, Izuku said, forcing a semblance of emotion into his voice as he took the single scoop of chocolate ice cream. You didn't have to do this, you know. The former number 1 heroine and retired symbol of peace smiled as she sat next to the boy, fully content with spending the afternoon away with the boy who had become the most important person in her life in such a short time. But I wanted to, my boy, she said before coughing into her hand, the feeling of her body betraying her for a moment, dampening the mood for a brief period before the time passed and the same boisterous laugh escaped the older woman's lips. A true hero knows that sometimes you just need to be a shoulder for a friend to lean on. Izuku smiled and forced the frozen dessert to his lips. He savored the taste of chocolate for the first time since he was given the aim to pass American Dream Plan when he had first started training for the UA entrance exam. It felt good to forget the usual well-balanced diet that dominated every meal, at least a little. So, the older woman said after a moment of silence, would you like to talk about it? Izuku sighed as he lowered his eyes lower to the ground. He really didn't want to talk about it, at least not right now. Still, he knew he was the type of person who wore his emotions on his sleeve and that if he didn't get directly in front of it as soon as he could, it would lead to future problems. She broke up with me, Izuku said with a whisper, his voice sounding hollow to his ears as he heard them. She broke up with me and said she only dated me as a joke. All Might placed her empty hand onto his shoulder, calming the young teen before another round of tears escaped his eyes. I know it's stupid, Izuku said, trying not to look at his mentor out of fear of seeing disappointment or pity in her eyes. I know I shouldn't cry about something like this, but… No, my boy, All Might said, her voice quiet yet powerful as she forced the teenage boy to look her in the eyes as she spoke to him. You have every right to be as upset as you are, don't let anyone tell you otherwise. He knew it was unfair of him to monopolize All Might, the All Might, for emotional support over something as petty and small as this. Still, if Izuku Midoriya was an expert in one thing, it was how unfair life could be. Well, to be fair, if he was an expert in one thing, it would undoubtedly be quirk analysis specifically. Maybe hero trivia in general, but knowing the unfairness of life was a close third. Maybe fourth if Kachin wasn't just messing with him about the ghost pepper curry he made for her birthday dinner last month. He had learned a long time ago that people weren't made equal, especially when you're born not only quirkless but you're born a boy on top of all that. A literal freak if he was using some of the less than favorable terms to describe him during the last 14 years of his life. But he had come to terms with that a long time ago. So what if he wasn't born to the 80% of the population with a quirk? He was going to be a hero. He especially wasn't going to let the fact that he wasn't born in the 90% of the world's female population stop him either. And he had proved them all wrong when he had not only become the successor to the greatest hero that ever lived and proved himself worthy of wielding one for all, but again, when he became only the second man to ever pass the UA entrance exam. He should have been above this, in all honesty. After so much struggle and work, his confidence and sense of self-worth were the highest they had ever been in his life. He stood taller than he did before. He spoke with confidence and a level of strength he would have thought impossible when entering middle school. He was a hero. All Might thought so. All his friends thought so. Even his mom thought so. But I know, Izuku said as he turned towards a happy couple walking hand in hand through the park, the bunny-haired girl laughing at whatever joke her green-skinned girlfriend told her. She was just the first girl to ever say she liked me that way. The week prior had been a whirlwind of activity, as nearly every hero school in the country descended into UA for a joint training festival, which meant hundreds of aspiring heroines from dozens of hero schools, each with cool and exciting powers and skills, would call UA their home for the next 2 weeks. Honestly, he would have spent the whole first day scribbling into his notebook about each new quirk he saw if Kacchan hadn't tried snatching it out of his hands. Stupid Deku. Stop talking about basic bitches in front of me, his blonde-haired childhood friend growled as she snatched his prized notebook out of his hands. I don't want to hear your muttering about these extras. Do you understand me? But then again, it was because of that where he met her in the first place. Sakura Surichi, a first-year student at Shiketsu Academy, with long pink hair tied in a bun, wearing the same uniform he remembered seeing from the provisional license exam. She had introduced herself after Kacchan had finished her tirade, placing herself between Izuku and the bombastic blonde. She said she wanted to meet him face to face after seeing him at the UA Sports Festival and how much he had inspired her by his performance. He blushed at her words, not entirely used to the type of attention he was receiving, but that should have been his clue that something was off. No one would have given someone like him that type of attention out of nowhere. The look on Kacchan's face should have been another clue. His relationship with Katsuki Bakugo had always been strange. Still, besides his own mother, the relationship he had with the explosive quirk user was as long and deep as anyone he could claim to have. But no matter how long he had known her while she was his friend, his bully, or his rival, he had never seen a look on her face quite like the one she wore when she watched Sakura talk to him. She invited him to lunch with an offer to study her quirk, an exciting force field that converted kinetic energy it absorbed from attacks into super speed. He jumped at the chance, of course. Near the end of the meal, she had confessed that she had a crush on him since seeing him on TV and asked to be his girlfriend. Him. A girl had confessed to him and wanted to be his girlfriend. It was crazy. Not in a million years did he think something like this could have happened, not even in his wildest dreams. But he said yes, and when she kissed him on the cheek before leaving to rejoin her class at the guest dorms, he had felt like he was on top of the world. It was just a shame none of his friends seemed happy for him. They smiled and congratulated him. There were even some good-natured jokes cracked at his expense by Hana and Mina, but none of the smiles seemed to reach their eyes. None of their words seemed to hold any of the warmth and friendliness he learned to associate with his classmates. There was a strange tension in the air that didn't seem to leave the 1A dorm room when Izuku entered his bedroom hours later. It only seemed to get worse after that. Tomoyo was stiff and robotic, even more so than she usually was the following morning, and seemed to be on autopilot most of the day, even going so far as to neglect her duties as class representative. When he asked what was wrong with her, she cut him off with a quick answer, not even bothering to look him in the eye as she did. It's nothing. I'm just worried about our next joint training exercise, she would say before turning away from him. 2 have to go. Achiko, his first friend since being diagnosed as quirkless, kept her distance from him. Whenever he tried to talk to her, she would give the same sad smile and say she just had some stuff on her mind and walked away. She just looked so defeated. "I'm sorry, I'm just a little under the weather, is all," she excused herself as she made her way to her bedroom one night. "I'm happy for you, though, honest." Shoko just sort of shut down after he told everyone. Almost reverting back to how she was at the beginning of the year. She was distant, only giving one-word answers whenever he spoke to her and barely speaking outside of class. "That's nice," she said awkwardly as she walked past him up the stairs, her voice hollow and emotionless goodnight. Kachin just seemed to deflate. She didn't yell or scream at him even once this week. A new record for her and something Izuku would have been happy about if he didn't see the emptiness of her eyes whenever he caught sight of them. "Back off, nerd," she growled at him as she walked past him in the hall. "Don't you have a girlfriend to annoy?" In fact, every one of his classmates seemed to take the news of his girlfriend rather poorly. Izuku was used to sometimes being kept out of the loop on certain things. It was expected that being the only boy in class with 19 girls, there were some things he wasn't privy to, girl issues he remembered his mom calling them. But they seemed to keep him at arm's length more than they used to. He would sometimes catch them talking amongst themselves in hushed whispers when they didn't think he was listening. He had learned early on in his pre-U.A. life to tell when people talked about him behind his back. It was a talent that served him well in middle and high school. They even seemed to be using that all-girls group chat they didn't think he knew about more and more whenever they couldn't just leave the room whenever he would enter. But while they seemed somewhat standoffish towards him, they were straight up cold when it came to Sakura the times he would hang out with her. A day didn't go by this week when the female portion of Class 1A didn't glare at the visiting student as they walked the halls. Some were straight up hostile if the confrontation his girlfriend had with Momo and Eiko of all people. The regal and kind vice representative glared at the shorter guest student with a harshness reserved only for those who deserved it. Simultaneously, the red-headed tomboy's entire body seemed to turn into armor at each word the visiting heroic student said in her defense. He tried defending her, even going so far as to confront several of his classmates on their strange behavior over the past week, to mixed results. Some of them relented somewhat, and a few even apologized for their actions. Still, they all seemed to be getting even sadder than they were before. Did they know what was going to happen? Why did they not tell him? "I get it, my boy," All Might said with a reassuring pat on his shoulder as she took a small lick of her own lactose-free ice cream. "Everyone wants their first relationship to be special." "I don't think we had was a real relationship," Izuku said, taking another lick of his chocolate ice cream. Being able to talk about his heartbreak already made him feel better than he did in the last couple of hours. "Maybe I'm just not cut out for these types of things." "Everyone thinks like that at one point or another," All Might said as she turned towards her young protege with a serious look on her face. "It's all about learning from the experience and growing from it." "I'm still getting used to people wanting to be friends," Izuku said, thinking of his less than enjoyable years before UA as he raised his ice cream back up to his face. "Let alone someone who wants to be in a relationship with me." Izuku almost choked on his ice cream when All Might started laughing again. It wasn't the polite chuckle she often used to fill space when she didn't know the right words to say in the situation. Nor was it the fake and practiced laugh of the #1 heroine used whenever she was interviewed in front of the media. But the deep bellows of someone who could not bring themselves to stop laughing. People stopped and stared at the gaunt giant in a fit of uncontrollable laughter. Children watched in wonder as her body swayed back and forth. Izuku was pretty sure he saw someone call for an ambulance for the clearly deranged woman who needed some sort of professional help. "Nonsense, my boy. I'm sure when the time comes, you'll find the right girl," she started before turning her head in an attempt to cover an upcoming cough. "Or girls, the more I think about it." Izuku didn't hear that last part, being far too busy racking his brain about the first half. Would he find someone like that? He thought of his own mother, the person who raised him by herself after her own wife had left them when he was 4 years old. If the kindest person he could think of didn't have someone who saw her the way she deserved to be seen, how could he, a man with a borrowed quirk, even hope to find someone who wanted to be with him? He kept those feelings to himself, though, as he leaned back against the bench and simply enjoyed the peace of the moment. It should have been a beautiful day. In all respects, it was. But something seemed off. A disturbance felt especially hard by the students of UA Academy, the top school for inspiring heroines in all of Japan, despite what many of its sister schools claimed. Birds were singing the coming of spring as the sun shone bright and high in the afternoon sky. But despite the picturesque scenes around them, the students of Class 1A felt off. For the life of her, Ochako Uraraka felt her mind drift away from her training. Her vision shifting away from the bent and slightly broken training dummy and staring off into space as she performed yet another underwhelming hip toss. Class representative Tomoyo Ida felt her mind go numb as she categorized her bookshelf for the third time since this morning, and for the third time that day, felt the crippling anxiety overtake her usual sharp and organized mind with thoughts of what ifs and what could have been. Mina Ishido, usually such an outgoing and peppy young woman, felt utterly drained. Forcing herself to try and reread the same paragraph from the same article from the same fashion magazine she had been trying to read all morning. She sighed and placed the magazine down, not at all caring to think about the emerald green sundress that was sure to be the hot new item of the season. Eiko Kirishima, the rock-hard tomboy, sat up from the bench press with a dejected look on her face. Her mind racing with daydreams of green eyes and freckles as she forced herself out of the weight room. Hyokujiro cursed herself as her fingers fumbled on the guitar string once again. The amp that her mother's had purchased for her birthday crackling with the sound of her frustration and failure. I guess this is another thing I fail at now. It seemed the entirety of Class 1A, known as the freshman hell class to the rest of the school, felt off for reasons unknown to outside onlookers. The reason for this could be narrowed down to the presence of two particular young women stalking the grounds of UA. Did you see his reaction, though? Oh my goodness, it was hilarious, Sakura Surichi laughed, her bright pink hair swaying as her body rocked back and forth. I know, right? Her partner and best friend, my Satoshi, breathed out. He just shut down, like she paused as she imitated a computer shutdown noise. That was priceless. I'm disappointed, though, the pink-haired Sakura said in between fits of hushed laughter. I was half expecting him to cry when I told him. Her friend grinned as she thought of the near-comatose male as they left him. The same male who actually thought he could be a hero despite his disability. I guess the little wimp wasn't as pathetic as we thought, the black-haired girl said with a scoff, not like that's saying much. To think that loser actually thought I liked him. What do I look like, some desperate cow, the pink-haired teenager exclaimed as she tossed her pink curls to the side with a wide grin. He should be thanking me for even pretending to find a male interesting enough to date. I can't wait to tell the others. Her raven-haired friend agreed, stretching the set of bat wings her quirk gave her with a satisfied look on her face as she almost skipped down the hall. Moni and Yuki are gonna freak when we tell them. Strutting through the hallways of the academy, they stopped when they encountered a peculiar figure. It was another male? He was tall, towering over them by more than a foot and seemingly just as wide around the shoulders as both of them combined. He would have been somewhat intimidating if it wasn't for the plain features and dumb smile plastered onto his face. UA was supposed to be the top hero school in the country, and they had 2 male students? There goes only letting the best of the best. He looked at the both of them in a bemused fashion before smiling more as he stared intently at the pink-haired girl. You, he greeted with an overly friendly smile, you must be the lucky girl Izuku has been telling me about. Sakura looked towards the older man without outward emotion on her face. For a brief moment, the man, Mirio Togata, thought he must have been mistaken. Pink hair wasn't that rare of a characteristic after all. But then the laughter started as both girls seemed to take a significant amount of enjoyment out of Mirio's mistake. It was an obnoxious sound that reminded Mirio of the sound of a motor starting, but one that hadn't been in use for a very long time. It almost whipped the smile off of Mirio's face. "Oh yeah, that wimp," the pink-haired girl said as the laughter subsided. "I never was interested in him in the first place." Mirio raised an eyebrow, his smile not faltering for a moment but his eyes gaining an almost predatory glint to them. "What's that supposed to mean?" "You heard me," the girl said, taking a step towards Mirio with a smirk carved into her lips. "It was all a joke. I just wanted to see if I could mess with the guy who had to break his fingers to be halfway useful on live TV." "Too bad, be kind jest," she raven-haired Batgirl chimed in before continuing to speak in a robotic tone of voice. "Error, error, error." The impression brought yet another round of laughter for the two girls, who unknown to them, were slowly falling closer and closer to what many UA hero students called the danger pit. Mirio remained calm outwardly, but those who knew him knew enough to see the danger the two women were in. After all, no one willingly chooses to get on the wrong side of the first man to ever pass the UA entrance exam with nothing but his own bare hands and a useless quirk. And one of the quickest ways to get on the wrong side of the lone male of UA's big three was to hurt his friend Midoriya. His little buddy was like a brother to him, like a baby brother who could break a building in half and had almost as much anxiety as one of Mirio's girlfriends. And after their shared experiences with Overhaul and the Yakuza only a few weeks prior, Midoriya was the type of guy Mirio was willing to do a lot for. And if that meant putting two first-year students through a wall, then that's just what he was going to do. He smiled wider at the thought, absent-mindedly cracking his knuckles at the thought. Oh no. He looked at his watch, seeing it beep closer to 1 o'clock in the afternoon. He was running late for his lunch date with both Tamation and Nejiraken. And knowing Tamation, she'll refuse to even talk to the waitress for a glass of water without him there. But, he thought with a smile. A smile that seemed to have a more dangerous glint than the one he wore before, "I may not have to." "I'm sorry," Mirio said as he flashed the brightest grin he possibly could as he slipped a hand into the pocket of his blazer. "I don't seem to understand what you're getting at." The two younger students looked at him, bewildered expressions on their faces. Growing more uncomfortable as Mirio's smile seemed to grow more and more. "Is he as stupid as he looks?" the bat-winged girl said with a side-eye glance. "Let me spell it out for you," the pink-haired girl snarled as she took yet another step forward. "I pretended I was interested in the little freak to mess with him. He's like a sad little dog trying to get people to like him. We saw the little idiot break himself on live TV, and it became an inside joke among our friend group. So when we came here for the joint training camp, we thought to ourselves how funny it would be to try and make him think I thought he was cute. It's not our fault the little loser was dumb enough to fall for such a blatant lie," the pink-haired girl said. "What kind of would think a girl like me would willingly talk to a male like him, let alone be his girlfriend?" "And send," Mirio said with a chipper voice as he raised his phone from his jacket pocket. "Oh boy, this is gonna be fun." "What?" "Yeah, see," Mirio started as he walked closer to the girls, placing his hands on their shoulders from behind. Each girl grunted both pain and surprise when they felt the physical strength in the older male's grip. "The guy you messed with, well, let's just say he's got a lot of people who would be very upset if they learned the truth about what you did." "Yeah, well, we don't." "I know you don't," the large upperclassman said as he turned to leave the two younger girls. "I would love to have a front row seat to what's about to happen, but I got some charming young ladies waiting on me as is." "Huh?" the confused pink-haired teenager said as she watched the weirdo walk away from her without even turning back around to look at them as he did. "Oh, this is going to be a blast." "You'll see," Mirio said as he rounded a corner and disappeared from sight, only popping his head back out for a brief moment. "I'd run if I were you." Sakura rolled her eyes at the apparently empty threat before grabbing the arm of her slightly more concerned companion. Whatever. Come on, babe. It's your funeral, he said before disappearing once again, leaving the two women alone with their thoughts. What's he on about? The bat-winged girl said with a slight waver of her voice. Just some off guy trying to scare us, Sakura said as she continued her walk back to the guest dorms. What's the worst that could happen? Ochako shook her bangs out of her face, feeling an uncomfortable clench in her stomach return as she hoisted the training dummy off the floor. Her mother once said heartbreak gets better as time went on, but she found that it somehow seemed to get worse as time passed. The days felt longer. This whole week seemed to drag on as Ochako counted the days until she who shall not be named would leave the sanctuary of her school, so she didn't have to look at her smug smile anymore. It's not like that would change much, Ochako thought with a sigh. She still won. Ring. It shouldn't surprise her that Deku found a girlfriend. It shouldn't. It was like she said. There was a lot to like about Deku. His kindness was infectious, his desire to help people was inspiring, and his willingness to be a true hero was a sight to behold. Of course, someone would find him boyfriend material. Her entire class certainly did. But they didn't act quick enough. The Great Treaty of the Summer Training Camp, as it was soon called. It was a perfect compromise for the would-be heroines, ending the year-long Cold War that had formed regarding confessing to Izuku about their romantic feelings. It was designed in part to keep the class from tearing itself apart at the seams while avoiding girls racing and competing with one another to see who would confess first. The general idea being was they confess as a group, or they don't confess at all. The girls of Class 1A had waited for the perfect time to tell him. Or at the very least, it allowed the few holdouts to woman up and accept their feelings or for someone to stop being such a tsundere about the whole thing. But this inadvertently brought about their downfall, allowing an opening for an outsider to act right under their noses. And now, all they could do was watch from the outside as Deku gave this stranger the attention they all seemed to be desperate for. Ring. Ochako turned to her gym bag and picked up the smartphone her friends had gifted her for her birthday. She paused at the picture of her and Deku at the beach during one of Class 1A day trips, acting as her save screen. Their faces smiling back at her as she simply stood still looking down. Damn it. She unlocked the phone, finding a message sent to her by Mirio. That was odd. Mirio rarely ever texted her. In fact, she wasn't even sure he had her number. He was far closer with Deku than anyone else in the class, preferring using Deku as a middleman if he wanted to ask any member of Class 1A a question, usually about either training or setting up a play date with little Eri. Oh. Ochako said to herself as she thought of the implications. Is he texting me because Deku is too busy with her to pick up the phone? Her shoulders sagged again, and if possible, she seemed to deflate even more than was only a few moments ago. She opened the text message with a defeated sigh. She played the audio file that Mirio thought was important enough to show her. She knew that voice. The depression Ochako had worn like a blanket was shrugged off in a moment. Every ounce of sadness she allowed herself to wallow in for days replaced with a wave of red-hot anger that made her skin tingle from the heat. That THAT she started, gritting her teeth as her entire body convulsed as the venomous words replayed in her head over and over again. But instead of finishing her thought, an eerie calmness overtook her. She knew what she had to do. And she knew who was going to help her. Being such a highly regarded heroine school, UA had the most topophthalene training facilities money could buy. Only the best for its students, after all. One such training room, designed to simulate a mountainside during a massive rockslide, was, as one would imagine, filled with large rocks and entire hills worth of boulders. Die, 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 die. Or it was filled with them when the morning began. That was until a certain blonde had spent the better part of her waking hours turning the multi-million-dollar training facility into a field of crushed rock and pebbles. Katsuki finally sat down in the corner of her training room where her bag was and drank heavily from a liter-sized bottle of her favorite sports drink. She went through several of these a day, especially on days where she pushed herself especially hard. But today seemed different. She chugged the rest of the bottle before chucking it against the wall, too frustrated to care where it went at the moment. Despite the quick breather and cool drink, her body still felt like it was on fire. She seethed at the feeling of pent-up energy her body refused to let go of. No matter how hard she tried, she couldn't get over the emotions that threatened to tear her apart. Stupid Deku, stupid extras, stupid stupid stupid, she muttered as she fired another explosion off, shattering a rock the size of a small car into dozens of pieces. You have no one to blame but yourself. Katsuki seethed as her mind betrayed her once again. Her inner voice turning into a revolving door of insults against her ego. Did you really think he would be interested in a girl who told him to kill himself? That thought paused her for a moment, freezing her body mid-move as the idea repeated over and over again. He wouldn't, would he? Her relationship with the only boy she had have known was a complicated one, and she'd be lying if she said it wasn't entirely her fault. Every problem that arose between them was because of her, things that would have broken any other relationship she had done tenfold against him. Still, he only thought the best of her. Like he saw something that no one else saw. It made Katsuki feel special. Not the type of special that the other girls from elementary through high school said she was, and indeed not how her useless teacher said she was. But like she was her own person, someone who couldn't be simply categorized by her quirk or her skill. And she had to ruin it all by being the biggest bitch she could be to honestly someone too good for her to begin with. Ring. She turned towards her phone that leaned against her gym bag, grateful to have her thoughts interrupted for once. She unlocked her phone and choked back a sob from escaping her mouth when she saw the image of her lock screen. A picture of her and Deku when they were 4 years old in their matching All Might Halloween costumes smiling back at her. She way too emotional for this crap right now. What does round face want anyway? Katsuki thought to herself as she opened the text. Her usual annoyance overriding her confusion when it came to the extras of her class. There was a reason she muted that stupid group chat Mina had come up with. She knew that voice. Current online users in Midoriya Appreciation Club: Alien Queen, Invisigirl, Manly, Bugzapper, Sue, Sparkling, Class Mom, Ida, EXPLOSIONMURDER, Jax, Dark Muse, Kirby, Measuring Tape, Coda, Sugar Mama, Tentacle, Todoroki, Juicy Grapefruit, Tail Woman. Bugzapper please, someone tell me they heard that too. Alien Queen well looks like Bakugo has finally snapped. Measuring Tape not gonna lie I'm surprised it took this long. Jax what? What is she on about now? Explosion Murder I am going to ing jail cause I am gonna kill this bitch. Measuring Tape I see it's about she who will not be named. Invisigirl please don't bring her up. I can't take another round of heartbreak. Class Mom it is rather unfortunate how this all turned out. Class Mom I somewhat feel I'm to blame for this outcome. Alien Queen no one blames you, Momo. Alien Queen the agreement was a solid idea. It should have worked. Ida indeed, all of us coming together and confessing to Izuku as a unified front when the time was right was an excellent idea. Invisigirl it would have been perfect if that pink-haired hussy didn't ruin it. Ida language. Sushi's not wrong. Manly holy crap. Bakugo is heading towards the guest dorms. Should someone stop her? Sugar Mama no, thank you. Whatever is about to go down, I want nothing to do with. Measuring tape local tsundere to angry to be stopped. Sparkling. I understand that the heart of a maiden is as delicate and vulnerable as well as anyone. Sparkling. But I fear such actions will only cause her heart to suffer. Jax, I can't believe I'm saying this, but I gotta agree with Sparkles. We can't keep wallowing like this. Jax, she confessed before any of us. Jax, she won. We lost. Sue agreeing with Aoyama? That's worrisome. Jax, tell me about it. I'm checking myself for curses as we speak. Dark Muse, rest assured, you are not benighted by such foulness. Sue, are you speaking from experience, Tokoyan? Manly, she does seem the type to be into that stuff. Dark Muse, what foolishness speak ye of? Invisigirl, I bet her room's full of candles and crystals. Dark Muse, Hagakure. Be you some invisible sneak thief once more? Did you not swear an oath to forego such debauchery? Invisigirl, wait, I was right? I haven't been sneaking. I was just making a joke. Dark Muse, I have made a critical error. Manly, hey, no worries girl, everyone had a witchy phase at one time or another. Bug Zapper, yeah. This is a no-judgment zone after all. Todoroki, it's how Izuku would want it. Alien Queen F. Manly F. Bug Zapper F. Measuring tape F. Jax F. Manly Todoroki, hey girl. Good to see you in the chat for once. Todoroki, thank you. Tailwoman C, I just finished up my spar with Kendo from Class B and was feeling rather good about myself. Tailwoman, then I opened up this chat and was reminded once again of the giant hole in my heart. Tailwoman, I offer you my friendship, and this is how you repay me? Sugar Mama mood. Manly mood. Invisigirl mood. So are we gonna just let Bakugo murder another student? Ida, I don't think we have anything to worry about. Despite her rather explosive personality, Katsuki isn't stupid. She won't jeopardize her place at UA over something like a relationship. Manly, did Ida just make a pun? Ida is typing. Jax, oh, here we go. Class mom, regardless. Ida is right. We are all mature young adults. Aspiring heroines who wouldn't go that far just to satisfy our feelings of jealousy. Sue, yeah, but it's Izuku we're talking about. Sue, who here hasn't thought about doing something similar to what Bakugo is doing at least once this week? Invisigirl. Dark Muse. Jax. Alien Queen. Manly. Bug Zapper. Measuring tape. Sugar Mama. Class mom. Tailwoman. Ida. Sparkling. Todoroki, yes, I've thought about freezing her several times this week. Sue, my point exactly. Tentaculum, guys, Achiko is heading towards the guest dorms too. Bug Zapper, oh crap, is she gonna try and stop Bakugo by herself? Grape Juicy Fruit, wow, I just saw Achiko across the field by training our Echo, and she looked possessed. I don't even know what's happening anymore. Measuring tape, Bakugo is heading towards the guest dorms to confront she, who shall not be named, over the green bean. Bug Zapper, you mean she's gonna murder a bitch? Invisigirl mood. Class mom, please don't. Izuku would be upset. Bug Zapper, curse is my only weakness. Bug Zapper, disappointing Izuku. Alien Queen mood. Measuring tape, and apparently Ochako is following close behind her just as, if not more, upset than Bakugo. Kota, shouldn't someone do something? Ida, we shouldn't assume the worst. Ochako wouldn't just resort to violence over something like this. Let us just ask her. Ida, Kirby. Kirby has posted a video. Kirby this. Suo this. Ida language. Sue, watch the video. Ida. Ida. Jax, did Ida just kick open the front door? Alien Queen, no, she destroyed the front door. Bug Zapper, oh no. Bug Zapper, oh no. Bug Zapper, oh no. Manly, that's it. I'm heading over to the guest dorms and putting that bitch's face through a wall. Jax, what's happening? Alien Queen, Invisigirl, Manly, Bug Zapper, Sue, Sparkling, Class Mom, Jax, Dark Muse, Measuring Tape, Kota, Sugar Mama, Tentacle, Todoroki, Grape Juicy Fruit. Alien Queen, ladies, we have a situation on our hands. Jax. Jax, that conniving, thieving little thought is a dead woman walking. Dark Muse, this foul beast's dark heart must be ripped out and stomped upon as she has done to our prince. Kota, what kind of a monster would do something like this? Sugar Mama, a monster who's about to get her legs broken, that's who. Invisigirl, Momo just made a baseball bat and walked out of the dorms without saying a word. Invisigirl, what a queen. Class Mom, I just want to talk to her. Sparkling, Epivantable, how dare this Garces think she can get away with this. Ah, son, grand regret. Measuring Tape, huh, Todoroki is literally on fire right now. Grape Juicy Fruit, dude, this isn't the time for jokes. Measuring Tape, no, seriously, she just burst into flames and ran past me towards the guest dorms. Invisigirl, what a queen. Tail Woman, are we meeting up somewhere, or is this a first come, first serve situation? Tentacle, I'll pick you up on the way, flying over right now. Jax. And the explosions have started. Sue, I see Bakugo has arrived first. Alien Queen, this chat was the best idea ever. The sun had set by the time Izuku made it back to the dorms. All Might was insisted that they visit his mother while they were out. His mother, being his mother, was insistent on having him and his teacher for dinner. Going so far as to make his favorite meal. Izuku wasn't a strong enough person to turn down his mother's katsudon. By the time Izuku had found the time to return from home, he had found the campus in complete disarray to his immense shock. For a dark moment, he thought it was a villain attack. He cursed himself at the thought that in his depression, he had ignored his friends as they potentially fought for their lives against the League. However, that thought died a quick death when Principal Naomi met him near the school entrance, with an almost giddy expression on her small furry face. Well. The mouse-bear-dog hybrid laughed when he saw him, ignoring the devastation surrounding her. If it isn't the man of the hour. Principal Naomi. Izuku shouted, rushing towards her in a hurry, overstepping what looked like a fallen tree encased in ice. What happened? Is everyone okay? Who did this? Calm down, young man. The small super genius said as she watched get closer. The smile on her face making Izuku think the white-furred creature had more predator DNA in her genes than he first thought. There's absolutely nothing to worry about. Just merely a training exercise that may have gotten a bit heated. Izuku stood stunned at her words before turning his attention back towards the chaos around him. This did not look like an accident. This looked purposeful and deliberate. But Izuku started as he gestured to the damage around him, all of this before being cut off. It's to be expected when the passions of youth, the power of love, interschool pride, and superpowers mix. Naomi said, sipping a cup of tea she pulled from. Actually, Izuku didn't know how she managed to do that. A second quirk. Rest assured though that this will not hamper the ongoing interschool training in the coming days, and we will be right as rain by the time the weekend ends. Her words softened for a moment before using her tiny paws to pat him on the leg. You truly are a lucky man. Izuku stared down at his principal with a confused look on his face. This reaction only seemed to cause the chimera to giggle even more as she turned to walk away. You'll see. Izuku couldn't seem to grasp the words given to him by his principal as he watched her form walk away. He became even more confused as he walked back to the 1A dorm. Hearing several of his teachers wishing him good luck and looking at him like a lamb being led to slaughter, but not in a negative way. Honestly, it was somewhat challenging for Izuku to explain what he was feeling at the moment. Still, he knew everyone else around him knew about it and seemed to know more about it than he did. Ring. He turned to his phone, pausing at the class picture screensaver, staring back at him before seeing that Mirio-senpai had shot him a text. Good luck tonight, little buddy, the message read before a picture of all three members of the Big Three appeared next. Their faces leaning into the frame with the only male of the three-way couple in the middle, holding peace signs at the camera. We're rooting for you. What the hell were they rooting for? Why were all the teachers smiling at him as he made his way back to his dorm? Why could he feel Principal Naomi watch him through the campus security cameras? What was going to happen to him when he got to his dorm? Order. This court is now in session. Honestly, this was not how Ochako had expected her night to end. She half expected to spend the rest of the night celebrating, talking and laughing with her classmates after they had collectively made she who shall not be named regret her decision to break Izuku's heart. The feeling of crushing their enemies' spirits while showing the rest of the visiting students what UA was made of was worth whatever punishment some of their teachers were planning for them. But if the look on Principal Naomi's face was any indication, Ochako doubted it would be so extreme. Snacks were opened, and cookies and cakes were baked to perfection. Soda and green tea flowed like waterfalls. Ochako had even heard Mina mention to Momo about a bottle of wine she had hidden away for a special occasion. She even expected to comfort Deku whenever he returned to campus. Hanging out with the best friends she had ever had and the boy of her dreams, all with a belly full of mochi? Sounded like the perfect end to a day. But here she was, sitting next to a girl who Ochako at one point in time disliked more than anyone she had ever met in her life, Katsuki Bakugo. They stared down the rest of their classmates in what could only be described as a makeshift courtroom designed by someone who had watched one too many crime dramas in their free time. Momo Yaoyoroza, Class 1A Vice President and resident big sister of the freshman hero course, sat atop the makeshift podium in Class 1A's common room. The dining room table stacked on top of what looked like writing desks from several of her fellow students' dorm rooms looked somewhat unstable. Still, Ochako suspected Momo was intelligent enough not to climb the structure unless she was sure of its safety. It certainly gave the mature heiress an authoritative presence as she took the position of judge. The heiress of the Yaoyoroza fortune sat clad in a judge's cloak and wielded a gavel she had created but a few moments ago. She peered down at the two defendants with an unreadable look on her face before she turned to either side of her. Two of the utterly massive living room sofas were positioned on either side of her, forming a giant tribunal that dominated an entire half of the dorm's common room, with 14 pairs of eyes staring back at Ochako and Katsuki with unreadable expressions on their faces. Is the prosecution present? Momo called as another figure moved into the corner of Ochako's eye, her long legs needing only a single stride to cut the distance. Yes, Your Honor. Class Representative Tomoyo Ida said, adjusting her glasses. Her usually serious features hardened in the way she only did when rules were being broken. The prosecution is ready. Ochako raised herself from the chair she had graciously been given in the middle of the scene, confusion overriding whatever curiosity she might have felt typically at a situation like this. But before the gravity user could voice either her confusion, the woman sitting next to her decided to communicate her own feelings first. "What the are you crazy extras doing?" the bombastic blonde Katsuki Bakugo said, shooting up like a bullet to glare daggers at the women in front of her. "What's the big idea here?" "Language like this is unbecoming of a future heroine," Tomoyo said, chopping her hands up and down in perfect sync with her words. "Please calm yourself. You make me," the explosion user said as she turned her glare towards the rest of her classmates. "Is anyone gonna tell me what is happening?" Questions later. For now, it's just yes or no, or yeah or nay or whatever you're comfortable with. Just, say you're here. Bakugo begrudgingly sunk back down into the chair with a growl, while Ochako let out a weak whine as she squeaked out a here. "Good, good," Momo said enthusiastically, nodding her head towards the rest of the class. "Let the trial begin." "Trial for what?" Ochako interrupted, confused and bewildered by the effort her class had put into all this. "Don't you know? Didn't Eiko tell you?" Momo actually looked somewhat embarrassed at the confession, like the wind had been taken from her sails. "Oh, I'm sorry. I thought we all knew what was about to happen." "Tie hair," Katsuki said as she stood back up to glare at the redhead as Eiko rubbed the back of her head apologetically. "I didn't know I was supposed to tell them," the red-haired tomboy said as she removed the first sleeve from her bailiff uniform. "I just finished getting changed." "Why are you ripping your uniform?" Tomoyo shouted, aghast at the redhead's actions. "Momo went out of the way to get your measurements precisely." "I'm sorry," the redhead said, trying to maintain a semblance of respectability as the taller woman bore down on her. "The uniform is perfect. It's just the sleeves." "I'm sorry, Momo." "Oh, it's no problem." The judge spoke with a small smile at the scene. "It's no problem at all." "Yeah, class rep," Mina said from her seat on one of the couches, looking on with rapt attention as Eiko tore off the second sleeve of her uniform. "How can Kiri be the manliest bailiff she can be when she has to wear sleeves?" "Yeah, girl." The blonde electric quirk user, Doi Kaminari, shouted from her seat, cupping her hands to her mouth like a megaphone. "Take us to the gun show." "Is there a veterinarian in the house?" Hana Siro said, the tape quirk girl's ever-present smile shining even brighter than usual. "'Cause those pythons look sick." The rest of the class erupted into fits of laughter as Eiko took the attention in stride as she posed to show off the definition of her newly freed arms. Cheers filled the room, and for a brief moment, Ochako was transported back to the class party that had erupted after they had confronted the horrible woman who had mistreated Izuku. Before, the rest of the class had collectively lost all their minds. As Eiko took her position as bailiff near the dorm entrance, Momo banged the gavel against her makeshift podium, attempting to regain control of the room. As her classmates settled back down into theirs, Momo motioned for Tomoyo to begin whatever she had planned. "Thank you, Miss Yayarosa," the youngest daughter of the Ida family began, her tone conveying nothing but the seriousness of her argument. She walked closer to the rest of the class sitting on the couches. "Esteemed gentlewomen of the jury, we find ourselves at an impasse. One that risks to tear down much of our hard work and one that will negatively affect not only our future careers but for our very way of life." Ochako had to admit her friend would have made a good lawyer. Even she was on the edge of her seat as the speedster spoke. "I argue that this moment is long since overdue and that those who hold us back," the blue-haired woman said as she removed her glasses to look at Ochako and Bakugo, "needs to be reminded what it is we are fighting for." "Here, here," Toru said animatedly, the floating skirt and frilly blouse gyrating in the air in such a way that meant the invisible girl had raised her left arm into the air with a fist clenched. "Who knew class rep was so good at this?" Hana whispered into the elongated ear of Shoji, who could only nod her masked face in agreement. So manly, Eiko whispered to herself as she watched the scene unfold. I still don't know what this is about, Ochako said as she looked towards Bakugo. Oh, it's simple. Momo said, her tone even and emotionless, despite the scarlet-red blush erupting on her face. We're confessing to Izuku tonight. The world seemed to stop for Ochako as she stared in open bewilderment at Momo and, by extension, her entire class. This was too soon. She wasn't ready to confess. There were still so many things that had to be done first, something she had to do first. Were the walls getting closer? Ochako thought as she tried taking deep breaths to try and calm herself down. Katsuki didn't react much better. What the are you crazy bitches doing? The explosive user exploded. The small firework display in her hands a warning to the other women in the room. We agreed when we all signed that stupid agreement we wouldn't try anything unless we all agreed to. That's kind of the problem, isn't it? The statuesque brickhouse of a woman Rikita Sato said. You two are the only ones who are ever against confessing to him. It is hard not to feel like you guys are holding the rest of us up for whatever reason. Ojira said, her tail sagged to the floor as she spoke. It's kind of hard not to see a pattern forming. You're ruining my romance subplot. Mineta spoke, jumping onto her seat and speaking with an aggravated tone to her lispy and breathy voice. I didn't luck out and found the perfect guy so that I can get blue-balled by you too. That happens to women? Shoko asked, somewhat confused by the vocabulary used to describe something she had experienced several times during the school year. Was this the reason for all her cold showers after being around Izuku? A kudere like you wouldn't understand. The tiny purple girl said as she pointed an accusatory finger at her taller classmate. I'm a kudere? Shopko said in a whisper, not fully understanding what the pint-sized girl meant by the word but knew it was perverted if Mineta said it. Shoko can't be a kudere. The invisible girl retorted. Her love of anime and all things cute driving her to defend her classmate's honor. She's more of Dondora. What's the difference? The Elector Quirk user said as she scratched the back of her head. She was pretty sure those were the same thing the last time she checked. The Dondora character is the strong silent type. Mineta explained, silently thanking her lucky stars that all the dating sims she played during middle and high school were paying off. Kuderis are quiet, but they're cold and cynical even to their love interest. I mean cold is literally in the description, Siro said, almost disappointed in herself for playing a part in this conversation. Seems like an open-shut case. I don't see it, Dio said, shooting the twin-colored girl a smile. Sure, no pun intended, Shoko is cold, but that's more to do with her being so socially awkward. Thank you, Shoko said, happy for the assistance her classmate had given her but still wholly unaware of what any of the dears were and how they applied to her. The conversation died down as Momo banged her gavel, every set of eyes turning back to the trial. The first time we got together like this to discuss a possible confession was at the provisional entrance exam. Momo said as she looked down towards Ochako and Katsuki with an unreadable expression. The 19 of us voted, and the 2 of you were the only ones to vote no. We agreed that we would only confess to Izuku if it were a unanimous decision. Ida continued, so as agreed, we dropped it. Then the whole thing with Overhaul happened. That was hard. The Yakuza mastermind had almost killed Deku in his attempt to save Eri. But even in victory, he received scars, both mental as well as physical. Ochako could remember just how broken Deku looked the day of Lady Night Eye's retirement. A long and storied career cut short due to life-altering injuries, and Deku blamed himself for it all. We voted to confess to him at the culture festival, Jiro said with a blush on her face. Clearly remembering the love song she had written explicitly for them to perform for the green-haired boy privately. But you guys still said no. Then a few weeks later, we lost him. Shoko said, her voice like an icy dagger to Ochako's heart, when he was confessed to by her right under our very noses. If you're gonna say something, just say it. Katsuki barked, her voice threatening but not carrying as much bite as one of her barbs usually did. Well, Koja said, the animal-speaking heroine of Class 1A said. Her voice as soft and delicate as a silk ribbon as she searched for the right words, it's just you two specifically, well. Your love for Izuku shines like a full moon on a dark autumn night. Tokoyama said, saving her shy friend the ordeal she found herself in. Yet the light of your feelings lay hidden by the gray clouds of hesitation and fear, like the beak of an inky black raven. Yeah, like that. Koja said, silently nodding with her gothic friend's words before continuing. It's obvious you like him just as much as everyone else here, but out of all of us, you guys are the only ones hesitating to admit it. That was true. Ochako had been conflicted about her feelings for a long time, at least vocally. She loved Izuku. There was no doubt about it. He was the only person in her life that made her feel this way, like she could conquer the world if need be. She doubted she would meet anyone in her life that she could see herself spending the rest of her life with more. Quite a lot for an 18-year-old, she thought, especially one training for her line of work. She had signed on to the agreement in part to make sure no one could take Izuku away from her as she tried to sort her emotions out. She didn't think it would be so soon, though. She thought maybe sometime in their third year. Or possibly after all of them graduate, but now? Was she ready? Katsuki sat there stunned as well, mulling over her own thoughts as she crashed back down onto her seat. Something flashed between her features before her anger once again took over. I told you extras before, the readied girl said, muttering to herself like the boy of their shared feeling did whenever he saw a new quirk. It's not the right time. Unfortunately. Ida said as she strutted through the courtroom, speaking to the jury once again. Our hesitation has almost cost us everything. We were lucky that the threat we faced was more villainous than virtuous, but there are dire threats still on the horizon. What threats? Ochako said, her voice wavering slightly at the implication. The prosecution calls its first witness, Ida said. At the same time, Eiko returned to the common room with what looked to be a person slung over her muscled shoulders. Unhand me this instant, you one a hooligan. The copycat heroine, Nada Monoma, said as she beat against Eiko's back in a vain attempt to escape the redhead's grasp. As Monoma was placed onto the witness stand, a groan filled the dorm room turned impromptu courtroom. Many jurors not looking forward to having to sit within arm's length with the volatile young woman. What's with this chick? Kaminari said as she sunk into her seat. Why did it have to be her? Jiro whispered to herself, already prepping her ears for the onslaught of noise the future phantom thief would unleash from her mouth. We could have invited one of the nice girls from 1B, right? Koda said with a frown, not liking having to say anything bad about another person, even if that person was well. She's a cunt, Katsuki muttered to herself. Not liking having to stare at the Class B student longer than she had to. Why is she even here? Language, please. Ida said as she reprimanded the defendant before turning her attention back on to her first witness. Please, Ms. Monoma, please tell the jury what happened the afternoon of the fourth day of class. I don't know what you're talking about. The blonde said as she looked towards the members of 1A with a disdainful look on her face. Unlike you pathetic 1A losers, I'm far too busy in my day-to-day life to sit here all night answering such simple and frankly insulting. Miss Monoma. Ida said, cutting off whatever rant the smug girl was getting ready to speak with a curt tone to her voice. You had an encounter with Mr. Midoriya in the cafeteria the first week of the school year. The blonde was about to retort. How was it possible for her to remember something that had happened almost a year before, especially when it involved someone like the only male in their year? Her words died in her mouth when she thought about it more. Memories flashing in her eyes like a traditional movie projector coming to life. Something slowly became more apparent to her. A look of realization appeared on her face. A look that every single woman in that room could recognize. "Can you tell the court what happened?" Ida said, not bothering to look at the blonde witness as she once again cleaned the lens of her glasses. "Well, it was lunchtime, and I was getting food, and then it happened after I had stacked my tray. The floor was wet, and I tripped, but I didn't fall, I was caught. Izuku had caught me and my tray. He leaped over, and grabbed me around my waist, and pulled me close, and I could feel how warm he was beneath his hard and strong and firm chest. But then he put me down and handed me the tray. Nothing was tilted or splattered because he had caught it perfectly in midair. He just handed it to me without saying anything, but just smiling his dumb, stupid smile." While Maida's testimony became more and more incoherent, a slight red blush became eminent across her cheeks. Perhaps it was just because the copy quirk user's complexion was usually quite pale. Still, Ochako noticed it instantly, and she did not like the emotions the sight of that color began to stir within her. The growl emitting from Katsuki's mouth was proof enough that her co-defendant was on a similar page. "And then what happened next?" Ida asked from her position in front of the Class 1B student. What before was a tiny hint of a blush blew up into one volcano of a scarlet-red glow. "I told that I didn't need his help with anything, and that I definitely did not need his help with catching me or my tray or holding me as he did. Especially not while he was in his workout gear. I would never." "Thank you, Mississippi Monoma, that would be all." Ida's abrupt closing of the cross-examination staggered Maida. For a moment, she looked like she had just been denied her own climax. But then the same blush from before overcame her, and she stormed out without another word. "That girl has issues, ribbit." "Like you're one to talk, Mrs. Mating season makes me want to be dominated," Mina said with a wide grin etched on her face. "It's a legitimate ailment," the frog girl said, not even bothering to turn to her pink-skinned friend. "It's a sickness that can only be cured by the thickness." "Ah, you two suffer drive copulation? Such a wanton bouquet of." The resident Gothic beauty spoke. Her own blush radiated past her dark feathers as she crossed her arms under her modest bust. "Is that the best you got?" Katsuki said defiantly as she glared at the rest of the class with a challenging look on her face. A chick so repressed she'd have a nervous breakdown at the thought of someone in class 1 holding her hand. "You think Monoma is the only one from class 1B who would be interested?" Jiro said as she fiddled with one of her jacks. The punk rocker turned to look towards the defendants. "As you said yourself, Monoma may be a weirdo, but she's not weird enough to deny feeling what she feels." That caused every woman in the room to pause. The heroines of Class 1B were all attractive in their own unique ways. They also had the added advantage of interacting with Izuku almost as much as 1A did. The rest of Class 1A whispered to each other, the thought of their sister class potentially stealing Izuku away from them, spurring them on further. "You don't think," Mina said, a contemplative look on her face replacing her usually easygoing attitude, "that all of Class 1B would?" "Kendo for sure would," the tailed heroine said with a weary tone to her voice. "She always seems to bring Izuku up whenever we have a spar together. At first, I thought she just wanted an extra partner in our unarmed combat sessions. But after a while, I got the feeling she's got an ulterior motive. That mantis-looking chick would too. I think just to spite Bakugo," Eiko said as she remembered the less than manly confrontation the two resident hotheads of the freshman classes would have before, during, and after their training exercises. "I don't really know if she would go further than that." "She would," Jiro said, remembering a particular conversation she heard only a few days prior during lunch period. At the time, she was too upset over Izuku's new relationship to put too much stock in it, but now overheard her and Nirenjika talk about it the other day. "The vice rep of 1B. Toru said, shocked, surprised at the boldness of the usually humble and quiet young woman. She'd be rooting for the studious girl if it was any other situation. I didn't think she had it in her. I heard from a reliable source that she's been going to Izuku for advice on how to use her quirk ever since our first joint training session, Shiro said, remembering the image of the two cinnamon rolls of the hero course sharing notes. Reiko Yanagi joined them a few times too. She's the ghost-looking girl, right? Doi said as she looked towards her avian friend with a worried look on her face. Reiko was eccentric, sure, but she was a bona fide 10 out of 10 in the looks department. Alas, during my moonlight travels, I have run across both the Phantom as well as Shinhai of Class 1B. They both spoke of Izuku in the most excited of tones. The Shadow Girl too? The resident invisible girl said, her hands balling into fists despite no one being able to see it. Same with that exchange student from America. Her eyes alight with such sparkling whenever our dear Izuku is around. I'm constantly reminded of Mio. Both the exchange students. Sata said, her thick and robust build shuddering as she remembered the dragon girl from their sister class. Both those girls are my Neta level thirsty. Hey! The purple-haired short stack said from her seat as she glared at her towering classmate. It's not my fault, I appreciate the finer things in life. We caught you trying to drill a hole into Izuku's bedroom the first week of school. Shoko added, her voice as even and emotionless as it usually was, and then you tried to watch him undress after our first combat training. As I said. The short woman said as she sat back down with a huff. The finer things in life. A slam of the gavel calmed the chatter among the class as Momo called for the next witness. Ochako could do nothing but watch as Eiko left to gather whoever the next witness would be. She felt a hole growing in the bottom of her stomach as she wondered just who would enter through the door next. Ochako could feel her pulse increase when she heard the sound of the door opening again as Eiko led in on at her. What's with that look-round face? Katsuki said as she leaned back in her chair. Whatever anxiety that showed on her face a moment ago was gone and replaced with the scowl most identified to her. Who is this extra? Ochako whispered as she watched in utter shock who walked shoulder to shoulder with Eiko. Mei Hatsum walked through the door with the same excited and manic energy she applied to most things in her life. Her golden eyes bounced off every surface in her path. Ochako felt herself almost gasp when the familiar pair of eyes rested upon her. Oh hey! It's you! The pinkette smiled as she looked at Ochako, unaware of the torrent of emotions the brunette was thinking. What was your name again? Uraraka. The gravity user said as she eyed her pink-haired counterpart. You know? The girl who can control gravity? Oh yeah. I remember now. You and Legs over there came to my shop together. She said as she pointed towards Ida. The latter looked to have almost spit out the water she was in the process of drinking when she heard her nickname. You guys are friends with Izuku, right? Ochako sighed, somewhat exasperated at the scatterbrain nature of the support class student. Mei was a nice girl, she supposed, a little more handsome and direct than Ochako was used to, but not the type of person that inherently rubbed Ochako the wrong way. If only she could keep her hands to herself regarding. Wait a minute. Mei didn't remember names. It was a common joke among the entire school, teachers included. Mei Hatsum was a driven but narrow-minded individual. In their attempts to make the best support items and inventions she could, someone who would ignore any piece of information she deemed useless. She knew nothing about politics, nothing about music, and absolutely nothing about essential human interaction. Any piece of information she was told went in one ear and came out the other. That included people's names. But she remembered Dika's name. But before Ochako could think more on the subject, Mei was escorted to the witness stand as Ida began her following line of questions. So, Miss Hatsum, we have a few questions we would like to ask you if you don't mind. I guess. The crosshairs of May's eyes turned to the women who now surrounded her, her smile not faltering a bit as she did. I don't know why I'm here, but ask away, thy mama. Good, Ida said, trying hard to ignore the nickname as well as the comments she heard her classmates make praising her thighs. Now, can you please tell the jury of your relationship with one Izuku Midoriya? Muscles? May said as she tilted her head, a confused look crossing her features for the first time Ochako had ever seen grace the girl's features since knowing her. I'm gonna him, of course. Good, now please tell the jury what idea's planned question died as soon as her mind registered Mice words. Excuse me, what? Wow, and I thought I was blunt ribbit, Sue said as she surveyed the delayed effect May's statement had on the rest of the class. Momo dropped her gavel, the dull thud echoing off the walls as she sat stunned, trying to regain her train of thought. Eiko had found herself just staring at the woman on the stand in blatant wonderment, and was that respect? Ida had almost fainted but managed to catch herself on the kitchen island acting as the prosecutor's desk. Toru's reaction, like always, was animated. Her floating clothes twisting and turning in the air like they had been caught in a hurricane as she shook her head back and forth. After she shifted all her limbs back from wide-opened mouths, Meiza helped Ida lift Kota back to her seat after she had fainted onto Mineta, crushing the small girl as she let out a wail of despair. Doi had short-circuited, similar to how she would if she had overcharged her quirk if the look on her was any indication. Jiro had fallen out of her seat with a blush that covered every inch of visible skin. Hana just looked on, her jaw somewhere on the floor next to the plate of cookies Sada dropped as she rushed to help Kota and Mineta. Ojiro's tail had shot straight up into the air, impacting Yuga's no longer sparkling face as she tried to hold in whatever French curse word was on her lips at the moment. Tokoyami sat straight in her seat, her feathers bristled and sticking in every direction as dark shadow appeared next to her face. The sentient quirk zone features showing shock and despair as it held its feathered hands to its face. Shoko sat silently, but half her body was on fire. At the same time, the other half had frozen her nearest neighbor, an unfortunate Hana's leg, to her seat. The only one on the couch who took the words in a somewhat healthy manner was surprisingly Mina, whose face was no longer its usual pink but instead a deep purple as she looked onto the chaos with a pleased smile on her face as she nodded her head silently. Ribbit. Sue managed to see all this from her spot on the ceiling after she had catapulted herself 10 feet into the air in the surprise of the Pinket's words. The defendants, on the other hand. What the did you say? You pink-haired skank. Katsuki roared as she charged towards the still smiling engineer, only to be tackled to the ground by the combined efforts of both Eiko and Ida. No one is putting their hands on DKU unless I say so. Calm down, Bakubro. Eiko said, instinctively turning a part of her body into hardened armor to absorb whatever blows her best friend would throw. This type of reaction is unbecoming of a future heroine, Ida said. Using her more considerable stature and bulk, she tried to smother the smaller and shorter girl but found it a difficult task regardless. Ochako took the chaos around her in with a severe look on her face. She was always a bit iffy regarding May, ever since she had seen how she and Izuku got along so well at the sports festival. The first time she had begun to be honest with herself about her own feelings. Even now, seeing the smile still plastered on May's face after inadvertently causing the chaos surrounding her, Ochako could feel something tug at her heart. Why? The gravity user said from her seat, looking from her own hands clenching the fabric of her still dirty workout pants, before staring May in the eye. Why do you have feelings for Deku? I mean, you have eyes, right? The engineer said, her voice sounding like she was explaining something to a child. He's so muscly and has cute freckles on his cheeks I just want to squeeze. May went quiet as she looked away from Ochako. A blush had appeared on her face, and a far less manic look entered her eyes. He's also the only person besides my parents who doesn't make me feel wrong about the things I like. Do you know how hard it is for someone like me to find someone who can stand to talk to me for more than a handful of seconds? Izuku appreciates me for who I am. He makes me want to be a better version of me. The rest of the class sat silently as they watched Mei speak. Even Katsuki stopped her struggle as she watched the support student say her piece. Ochako felt a huge weight lift off her shoulders as she listened to Mei's words. Momo, the poor girl, fought to keep the tears out of her eyes. Simultaneously, the ordinarily stoic Shoko had a slight smile on her face from hearing the similar situation to how she discovered her own feelings. The sparkling brightness of a maiden in love. Aoyama said with a tear in her eye, "It reminds me of Mwa, no? Like a sunrise breaking through the darkness of a young dawn." I've only met this girl today, but if anything bad were to happen to her, I wouldn't know what to do with myself, Mina said as she launched herself at her fellow Pinkette to hug and squeeze. Can we keep her, please? This isn't what this trial is supposed to be about, Momo said, looking out of her depth after hearing both Mei's brutal honesty as well as her emotional words about the lone male of 1A. I don't think. Oh, I see what's happening here, the Pinkette said as she looked around the other faces that filled the room. I'll make sure Izuku's next hero costume is made out of a skin-tight material if you let me in. All those in favor of allowing Mei into the group? Momo shouted. 18 distinct voices answered Momo's call. Congratulations, sister, Toru gushed as she slung her invisible arm around Mei's shoulder. Welcome to the harem, Hana said as she regained the ever-present smirk on her face. Can we please not call it that? Jiro said, a blush covering her face at the implication of the word. It is what it is, Kaminari said as she joined her harem mates in the middle of the room. Why run from it? 'Cause it makes Izuku sound like he's one of those self-insert main characters from one of those poorly written visual novels, Sue said as she landed back onto the ground. Izuku isn't shallow enough to be one of those. Wow, shots fired, Shoja said. What even is the point of all this? Katsuki growled as she remained sitting, watching the other women in front of her with a critical eye, all stupidity aside. Why now? We all almost lost Izuku, Ochako answered, her knees feeling weak as she felt the eyes of the rest of her class fall on her as she spoke. We almost lost Izuku because we were too slow to confess. What happens next time? What happens when there's a girl who sees what we all see every day? Come on, Bakugo. Just admit it already, Momo said, the vice representative having made her way off the podium. No, she said defiantly, not even looking at Momo. You love Izuku, Shoko said as she stared at Katsuki like a patient teacher waiting for an answer to a question she already knew. Shut it, icy hot, Katsuki shouted, glaring daggers at the two-toned heroine, before looking away when she noticed her entire class was now looking at her with the same looks. You want to be with Izuku, Mina said, skipping over to her sitting friend to press her pink cheek against the angry blonde's own. I do not want to be with that useless Deku, Katsuki shouted, pushing her pink-skinned classmate away from her as she stood up to walk away from the crowd. Say it, say it, say it, the crowd chanted, 19 unique voices chorusing into one single tidal wave of noise. Fine, I love DKU alright, I said it. I want to walk in the park while holding the nerd's hand. I want him to make me my favorite curry every year for my birthday. I want him to kiss me and tell me I'll always be his Kachin. I want to carry that nerd's child. The explosive blonde shouted, collapsing into her seat as if every ounce of her energy had left her body. She huffed to catch her breath as she stared at the 19 pairs of eyes staring at her in bewilderment. Is that what you want me to say? The room was quiet as if everyone still needed the time to process what Katsuki Bakugo, the most headstrong and volatile woman any of them had ever met in their lives, had said and what she looked like now. Gone was the angry scowl or wry smirk. Gone was the dangerous glint in her red eyes. Instead, replaced with quivering lips set in a pout and a scarlet blush no one had ever seen on the explosive girl before. She looked like a pure maiden who had just realized she was in love for the first time. "See?" Ida said as she planted her hands onto her hips. "Don't you feel better with that off your chest?" Off 4 eyes. And the old Katsuki had returned. "Then it's settled," Momo declared as she banged her gavel against the podium, effectively calling whatever kangaroo court that had taken control of the 1A dorms to a close. The class erupted in cheers and hollers. Some of the young women, like Tsu and Shoko, consoled several of their classmates having emotional episodes, such as Toru and Koji. Eiko shed manly tears of happiness at the declaration, pumping her fists into the air as she did. Mineta had started muttering uncontrollably about all the couple's activities she was finally going to experience. Some of which weren't actually perverted, surprising the few who heard her. "So we're really doing this?" Koda said, her voice even softer than it was before. She felt like pinching herself. "This is actually happening?" "When Izuku gets back from wherever he went tonight, then indeed we are," Ida said as she readjusted her glasses, trying hard to hide just how emotional she was at the moment. The feelings she had held since Stain was about to be uttered to the man who had saved her life. She needed to call her sister and mother immediately. "I'm literally shaking," Toru said as she wrapped her arms around herself. "This calls for a group hug to our last 2 holdouts. And to our new sister in arms," Mina shouted as she wrapped her arms around Mei and Eiko, dragging the 2 of them towards where Ochako and Katsuki still stood. "I don't know who you are, but I'm just happy to be here," Mei said, her smile not leaving her face as her fellow pink sister manhandled her. "Mina Ishido, 1A. Mei Hatsum, 1H. If you touch me, Pinky, I'll rip your hair out of your head," Katsuki said as she backed away from the approaching mob led by Raccoon Eyes. The 2 pink-haired young women looked to one another before responding simultaneously. "Which one?" Before Katsuki could respond, she felt the first pair of arms wrap around her. ING round face like the ING traitor she was had managed to trap her arms from behind, the rest of the extras following soon after. Eiko tackled her onto the couch, followed soon after by a grinning Dio and Hana as the taped heroine shouted "dog pile" on the top of her lungs. Mei had landed on top of Mina's stomach through the chaos as Kyoko was lifted off her feet by a grinning Shoji. One by one, each had joined in, wrapping their arms around each other. "I'm gonna kill every single one of you while you sleep," Katsuki mumbled. Her voice muffled against Shoko's neck and Ida's sharp reprimand against her threat. Ochako could only smile as she let herself be lost in the unfolding situation. Her heart beat faster as she thought of the moment of truth, now closer than ever. Even now, she had her reservations. But seeing the same looks of love in the eyes of her classmates made Ochako feel less doubt in her ultimate decision. "What are you guys doing?" A familiar voice broke through the chaos. At once, the noise died, and for a moment, Ochako forgot 19 other women surrounded her. She stared at Izuku's confused face as he stood in front of the dorm's main entrance, her heartbeat the only sound she could hear. The world seemed to stand still for a moment. Each of the girls simply stared at the green-haired powerhouse, their brains all but shut off completely. Ochako noticed Deku's own eyes pass over every one of theirs as he tried to analyze just what was happening in front of him. Deku Ochako started before she was interrupted. "Midoriya!" Momo shouted, the color draining from her face as the reality of the situation hit her. "Midori!" Mina screamed as she pulled Mei and Toru closer to her, squeezing her newest and oldest gal pals against her cheek. "Hello, Izuku," Shoko said, only a dusting of red against her pale face, indicating something was different about her. "Ribbit." Sue ribbited, for once in her life, at a loss for words. "Muscles." Mei shouted from her spot against Mina, her manic smile growing more intense as she stared at the boy. Midoribro. Kirishima shouted, her face the same shade of red as her hair. I think I left my oven on, Rikia said. Her nerves momentarily getting the better of her as she tried to excuse herself to leave, only to feel the grip on her shoulders tighten, keeping her in place. Sup green, Jiro said, trying hard to keep her heartbeat in check and remain calm. Izuku. Mashiro said with a grunt as she stepped on her tail to keep the limb from wagging out of control. Zuzu. Toru said, almost skipping in place as the scene unfolded. Excitement practically bubbling over as she was forced to wait for the others to make the first move. Sherry. Aoyama shouted as she tried to twirl where she stood, only to find herself tangled around the limbs of her classmates. Fancy seeing you here, Kaminari said, shooting finger guns as she prepared to confess to the man she wanted to spend the rest of her life with. My prince of the night, Tokoyami shouted, her eyes wide open, and her beak hung low as dark shadow moved to push her forward. This isn't my dorm room, Shiro said, her brain trying in desperation to find a coherent statement and only just barely succeeding. Well, Meiza Shoji said, her multiple arms holding many of her classmates, becoming slack and falling to her side, I got nothing. I think I should go feed my bunny right now. Koja Kota said as she fought desperately to remain conscious as she once again felt like she was going to faint. Mineta said nothing, only pulling out what looked to be a condom out of the pocket of her skirt, a lecherous smile plastered on her face. DKU. Katsuki growled as she looked at her childhood best friend like a wild lioness on the hunt for her next meal. Stick to the agreement, everyone. Ida said, her tone carrying all the authority of her position as class representative as her hands were a blur of motion. For a brief moment, all seemed in control. Then all hell broke loose. Every woman for herself. Someone, probably Kaminari or Kirishima, shouted before the group hug exploded into a rush of movement. Swallowing nervously, Izuku realized that there was no fleeing from this and silently accepted what was about to happen. Current online users in Class 1 Bull Big Sis, Princess Peach, The Last Airbender, Top Heavy, Bunsoft Steel, Reptar, Skeletor Meme, Black Noir, Flashdance, Copycat, Ghostbuster, Thorn-Covered Rose, Shota, Elate Huntress, Scyther, Textface, Silent but Thirsty, Sticky When Wet, Mulan. Big Sis, is anyone going to explain to me why Eiko Kirishima of Class 1A just kidnapped Nada? Reptar, oh, crap, that actually happened? I thought Kanoko used the wrong type of mushrooms during dinner again. Princess Peach, I said I was sorry. Reptar, and we love and appreciate you, baby girl. Reptar, I just love to mess with you. Bunsoft Steel, you got nothing to worry about, class rep. Bunsoft Steel, Eiko is a good person. If Nada is with her, she's in good hands. Princess Peach, it's adorable how quickly you defend your girlfriend like that. Flash Dance total relationship goals. Bunsoft Steel, what? No, Kiri and I aren't a thing. Bunsoft Steel, she's not my type. Reptar, it is too much like masturbation, right? Thorn-Covered Rose Setsuna. Thorn-Covered Rose, have you no shame? Reptar, not really, no. Top Heavy Man Setsuna, you need to get laid. Reptar, you're not telling me something I don't know. Shota-sen, not you too. Top Heavy, I could go for a nice lay myself. Elate Huntress, shouldn't you say you wouldn't mind getting drilled? Top Heavy, ha, nice. Flashdance, speaking of a nice lay. Flashdance, has anyone seen Izuku Midoriya today? Top Heavy, he usually works out at Training Ground Alpha Saturday afternoon. But I didn't see him when I was there earlier. Reptar, were you only there to try and snap a couple more pictures of him? Top heavy, you're complaining. Reptar, hell no. Those pictures are the only thing that got me through the winter. Shota, oh god, is it time to thirst over Izuku already? Big sis, fine. I call this meeting of the Give Me the You social club to order. Black Noir, I can't believe Set convinced you to call it that. Big sis, I can't believe your username is black in 2 separate languages. Black Noir, I don't believe I asked for your opinion. Skeletor, meme motion to have Midoriya let me run my tongue over those abs. Ghostbuster seconded. Princess Peach thirded. Top heavy 4th and 5th right here. Scyther, hey, the Sahara called it wants its thirst back. Text face, you are just mad because he knocked you out during our last joint training session with a single punch. Text face, and now you're mad because now you remember how you woke up being cradled in his arms while he brought you to Recovery Girl. Scyther, you can't confirm that. Text face. Bunce off, steal that boy. Bunce off, steal, now that's my type. Elate Huntress, a woman of culture, I see. Silent but thirsty, I will him. Reptar, that's my girl. Flash dance, well, that's blunt. Bunce off, steal, preach it, sister. Shota, preach it, sister. Preach it, sibling. Sticky, when wet, I do not disagree with you, because me too. Sticky, when wet, you've barely spoken with him. What's, do you see in him? Silent but thirsty, his blush. Big sis agreed. But please tell me that's not the only reason you like Midoriya. Silent but thirsty, it isn't. Silent but thirsty, I also called dibs. Black Noir, we never agreed to that. Silent but thirsty, not my problem. Shota, no fair, you can't claim all that to yourself. Scyther off. Scyther, if anyone is. Scyther has deleted a post. Scyther, you didn't see that. Big sis Yui, I deal with Monoma enough, please don't give me this headache too. Thorn-covered rose is a sin, my sisters. Top heavy, hold the phone. Skeletor, me Monoma? Our Monoma? She's openly thirsting for Midoriya? When were you going to tell us? Elate Huntress Ibra, I apologize if I ever offended you during our late-night philosophical discussions on religion. Elate Huntress, because clearly, God exists. Princess Peach, is it shocking? Princess Peach, don't we all like Izuku that way? Top heavy, preach. Reptar, preach. Skeletor, meme, preach. Black Noir, preach. Sticky, when wet, preach. The Last Airbender, I'm actually surprised with you though, Kanoko. The Last Airbender, I always figured you'd be more into those pretty host types. The Last Airbender, not buff, green, and nerdy. Princess Peach, he likes my quirk, and he enjoys it when I talk about mushrooms. The Last Airbender, he also thinks your eyes are pretty. Princess Peach, he does? The Last Airbender, I heard him mutter it during training one time. Silent but thirsty mushrooms. Reptar, they're everywhere. Big sis Kanoko, please. Princess Peach, IIT's fine. Princess Peach, I have it under control. Princess Peach, I can handle this. Princess Peach is offline. Top heavy, God, I love that girl. Big sis Cozy IY. The Last Airbender, honestly? I wanted to see her reaction. The Last Airbender, I was not disappointed. Mulan, I thought we decided to only thirst when all of our school work is finished. Mulan, I still have a present mic English assignment I have to finish up before Monday. Mulan, you can't do this to me. Reptar, sorry, my fellow cold-blooded sister. Reptar, the thirst is calling me. Black noir mood. Top heavy mood. Sticky when wet mood. Elate huntress indeed, Mr. Midoriya certainly has many desirable traits, doesn't he? Bunsoff, steal those arms. Reptar, those thighs. Text face. Black noir, screw the thighs, what about what's in between? Yes, please. Shota, what does that boy eat? Silent but thirsty, I know something I hope he eats. The Last Airbender mood. Reptar mood. Flashdance mood. Black noir mood. Flashdance mood. Top heavy mood. Thorn covered rose lewd. Ghostbuster, his smile is cute. Big sis never change Reiko. Ghostbuster, wanna kidnap him? Big sis never mind, for the love of all might please change. Black noir, we should totally kidnap him. Big sis, please no. Reptar, girl, you are speaking my language. Yay. Girls plot. Big sis, pony, no. Reptar, pony, yes. Big sis, all of us being for Izuku aside. Big sis, has anyone else noticed how off 1A is? Horny, you mean besides how they get to sleep under the same roof as my future husband while I have to be neighbors with Togara? Scyther, you got a problem with that dwarf? Say it to my face. Big sis, I'm serious. Something is up with 1A. They've been in a funk all week. Bunsoff, steal, no, I think she's right. Bunsoff, steal, my girl Eiko has been completely out of it the past few days. Sticky when wet, you don't think? The Last Airbender, oh no. Flashdance, the rumor is true. Bunsoff, steal the rumor? Elate huntress, that Izuku Midoriya is in a relationship with a visiting student. Mulan, what? Mulan, when was I going to be told about this? Reptar, a sad day, my sisters in thirst. Ghostbuster, a sad day indeed. Silent but thirsty. Skeletor, mean damn it all to hell. Text face. Horny, why? How could this have happened? Flashdance, I don't know about you guys, but I'm totally blaming Nada for this. Sticky when wet, she was very negative whenever Class 1A is involved. Black noir, what a mad banquet of darkness. The Last Airbender, oh wow. That really rubbed off on you fast? Bunsoff, steal, that certainly explains a lot about Eiko. Big sis, we should be happy for him. Shota, I am. But Mulan, I just wished it was me. The Last Airbender mood. Reptar mood. Flashdance mood. Skeletor meme mood. Flashdance mood. Top heavy mood. Ghostbuster, I fear my dreams of walking hand in hand with my beloved during the twilight hours are now a distant fantasy. Elate huntress, alas, I too have heard the validity of these rumors. Elate huntress Sakura Surichi, a first-year student at Shiketsu, I believe. Black noir, wait. Shota, is that the same dorm room that 1A blew up? Mulan, they did what? Mulan, I've been inside working on my paper all day. What happened? Reptar, like a few hours ago, Class 1A straight up yeeted an entire heroics class from Shiketsu Academy out of the guest dorms. Reptar, it was pretty ing sweet. Thorn-covered rose language. Ghostbuster. So wait. Copycat sisters of Class 1B, we have a situation on our hands. Skeletor. Mean did they? Sticky when wet. Oh crap. Shota. Hey, Nada is back. Copycat. The harlots of 1A are preparing to steal Izuku Midoriya from us. Ghostbuster harlots? Black Noir Midoriya? Sticky when wet us? Scyther. Holy crap, is this actually happening? Reptar. I would like it to go on record that I called this the first week of class, and I gratefully accept all of your apologies. Flashdance. Are we forming a harem? Shota. Please don't call it that. Text face. Silent but thirsty. Yes. Silent but thirsty right now. Thorn-covered rose. Yui, control yourself. Skeletor. Meme. Don't ruin this for me, Ibera. Skeletor. Meme. You know I love you like a sister. But if you go all Bible thumper right now, I'm going to scream. Reptar. We should let our little Rosebud have the first go. Reptar. It might do her some good. Skeletor. Meme. Maybe wrap her vines around those muscled arms and tie him to the bedposts, am I right? Reptar. Nope. Ibera will let him do all the work. He'll use those big muscles to tear off her uniform and take her right against the wall. Silent but thirsty. Hot. Sticky when wet. Ibera, it's okay. Big Sis Set and Juza are just trying to mess with you. Sticky when wet. Don't let Set have the satisfaction of getting under your skin. Thorn-covered rose. You're right, of course. Thorn-covered rose. They're simply placing their own immoral thoughts and sins onto me. Thorn-covered rose. They certainly didn't find my journal and read the passage from last week. Reptar. Silent but thirsty. Skeletor. Meme. Top heavy. Did she just? Shota. Holy crap. Set and Juza just broke into Ibera's room. Thorn-covered rose. Don't you dare read my notebook. It's just a writing exercise. Ghostbuster. If this is an exercise. Ghostbuster. I really want to see what the real thing looks like. Silent but thirsty. Wow. Shota. I will never look at Ibera the same way again. Bunsoft Steel Man, look at us. Flashdance. Forming a harem with the best friends a girl could ask for. Reptar. Oh, stop. Reptar. You're gonna make me cry. This chat was the best idea ever. The sun had risen several minutes ago, signaling the start of a new day. But to Izuku Midoriya, hero in training and ninth wielder of One for All, it felt as if several hours had already passed since his surroundings became illuminated. Time, he had learned, seemed to have no meaning at the moment, as he laid there as still as he could. He was not a stranger to sleepless nights, not by a long shot. More than once, he had found himself ignoring the comfort of his bed whenever a particular madness had taken hold of him. Sometimes it was a specific online debate over the superiority of one pro-heroine over another. All Might over Endeavor, any day of the week, thank you very much. Sometimes he simply let his mind wander towards a particular creative outlet. Whether it be putting the finishing touches on one of his model sets or the writing and or reading of hero-themed fanfiction. All Might must never know about a specific one about her saving the life of a quirkless boy Izuku may or may not, but certainly did not write when he was in elementary school. But as the sun rose brightly over the horizon, he could think of one thing. Izuku could be entirely sure of the fact that he had never spent an entire night doing this before. Even though he was honest enough to admit the thought had crossed his mind a few times during his wildest fantasies. The blaze of the sun shone through the windows of the common room. The morning sun warmed the hills and valleys of smooth skin and soft yet incredibly muscular bodies around him, sending his mind into a fresh chorus of spasms. his mind working overtime to come to terms with the realities of his new normal. Oh yeah, that part might be something he needed to explain to someone. If not anything else, but to confirm what just happened over the last day and a half actually happened. Because wow, did he have trouble believing what had just happened was true. But he digressed. Oh God, yes. He remembered Achiko of all people scream as she shuddered against him. Her smaller hands held his own scarred digits as they floated against the ceiling as she wrote out her. He really shouldn't be thinking about that. But, unfortunately, he was likely to lose consciousness before he could escape the tangle of bodies he had found himself in. He needed space to think, and he couldn't think properly when he was tangled up like this. Izuku gulped as he stared upwards towards the ceiling, using the sound of light snoring and the rhythmic breathing of 20 bodies around him to distract himself from the encroaching thoughts and memories. An action that almost went up in smoke when he accidentally caught a whiff of the brown sugar body wash Kaken used. The sweet smell drove Izuku crazy as the blonde turned in her sleep, her naked thighs rubbing against his legs accidentally. Accidentally. Izuku thought with a roll of his eyes. Kaken never did anything accidentally, even when she was asleep. Oh yeah, you're so huge. Kaken shouted as she looked down at him, her eyes blazed with a fueled haze as she wrote him again, I want everything. You hear me, nerd? I want you to ruin me. Oh God, this was harder than he thought it would be. Izuku took a deep breath and summoned every skill and trick he had mastered during his long life as a social outcast before he had met All Might and gained a quirk. Izuku relaxed his arms and let them slack against the floor. He ignored the itch on the side of his nose to avoid inadvertently waking one of his companions from their well-earned sleep. He shifted his left arm out of Momo's grasp, instantly missing the warmth of her body as soon as it left his skin. Thankfully the motion didn't awaken the young woman. Still, if the pout on her face meant anything, then she knew something was wrong in her subconscious, even if she didn't know what. Izuku sat up slowly, unwrapping the arms of Ochako and Hana around his neck as he did so. Izuku silently thanked the flexibility training Tsu had put him through since the beginning of the year as he contorted his lower body off the ground. Quickly lifting the passed out and smiling form of Dio as he did. He twisted his torso as he lowered the blonde back to the ground, almost falling face first when he had heard Dio in her sleep about wanting her daddy to play with her more. What were the odds the electric user was talking about him, though? Right? He couldn't have been daddy, right? Oh no, I failed my English test, Duo whispered as she wrapped her legs around Izuku's waist, keeping him right where she wanted him. I hope daddy isn't too hard on me. Oh God, he was daddy. Izuku, you're muttering. A voice said from Izuku's right, freezing the boy to where he stood. He turned towards the noise, finding the form of Shoko, naked as the day she was born, staring at him with what looked to be a bowl of the leftover soba from dinner. The past 24 hours had been a blur. Still, Izuku distinctly remembered someone, probably Momo, had catered dinner for them all from a restaurant he had never heard about before. All he knew was it was the type of restaurant he had never been able to afford to eat by himself before and that Momo had paid for it herself as her treat. According to the heiress, they were too busy to worry about cooking. Instead, they all needed their strength and focus for other activities. Oh yes, Momo ate into his mouth as she kissed him, her hips grinding even harder than before. Make me yours. Yeah, activities. Izuku stared at the twin-colored-haired girl. He was frozen to his spot as he could only watch the girl finish up the remainder of her noodles before placing the now empty bowl on top of the table. She smiled at him, one of those small smiles she only ever used when they were together, before making her way towards him. Before Izuku could do anything, the girl had cut the difference between the two of them. She wrapped him in a hug before gently bringing him back down onto the floor with the rest of his classmates. Well, classmates might be the wrong word to use now that he thought about it. Wait, were they? Were they all his girlfriends? Oh man, Izuku thought to himself as he readjusted his head for Shoko to rest her head in the crook of his neck. The girl readjusting one of the many blankets that littered the floor over the night and day of constant movement. How was he gonna tell All Might about this? Would she be disappointed? Would his mentor think he was nothing more than some playboy who used her quirk for? Oh God, he suddenly felt awful, as if the mental and physical strain had finally been registered by his brain. Oh God, Izuku muttered to himself, quieter than he usually would, avoid waking anyone else up. How am I going to tell Mom about this? UA headmistress, arguably the most intelligent living being in the world and resident tea lover. The science experiment turned educator known only as Naomi wore many hats in her life. Each one was tiny and looked adorable on her because of her small and cute appearance. Was she a mouse? Was she a bear? Or was she a dog? But she digressed. She sat at her desk silently, enjoying a fresh cup of steaming hot Countess Grey tea as her guest continued to pace back and forth in front of her. Humans were always so fascinating to watch, Naomi thought to herself as she took another sip of her tea, especially under duress. Asaka Inoki, the headmistress of Shiketsu Academy, was a prime example of that. Before her, the retired heroine known to villains and civilians alike as the Iron Maiden was usually as emotionless as she was fearsome. The giant woman, whose quirk granted her strength enough to turn dumbbells into balls of scrap in her hands and transform her body into steel, was as respected as she was feared during her active duty time. But despite being hailed by many in heroics as a constant professional, she was far from the image of stoic perfection she conveyed on the job. The steel-like gray skin of her body was tinged with a red hue, a telltale sign for those who knew her that she was working herself into one of her rare shows of emotion. How dare they? She spoke, her usually calm and even tone breaking from barely contained anger. To think my own students would do something like this. The ironclad headmistress of Shiketsu Academy had been a storm of anger when she had entered Naomi's office the previous hour. She took her role as both an educator and den mother for her students seriously. When she had first heard of the members of Class 1A confronting the Shiketsu students Saturday evening, Naomi's counterpart had threatened to pull Ketsu out of the joint training exercise. She had even gone so far as to threaten Naomi's position at UA with a call to the Heroics Commission. Which was a mistake on her part. But Naomi chalked that up to the instincts of a mama bear lashing out when her cubs were threatened. Naomi could respect that. She didn't like it, but she understood the emotion. It was something Naomi believed she could use to her advantage. However, Inoki changed once she discovered what had been the cause of what many called the thrashing of Ketsu. Inoki was a private woman, one who held her personal life close to her chest. Even when fully retired from the life of an active heroine, only a few of her closest confidants knew of Inoki's family life. Many would be shocked to learn that the woman was not only happily married but a mother of 4 and, as of just a few months ago, a first-time grandmother. A grandmother to a healthy and chubby baby boy. When the recording of her students' words had finished playing, Naomi knew the former Iron Maiden could only think about the Izuku's similarities with her grandson. The same baby boy she had made time to have a video call with every night because she couldn't stand going a single day without seeing him. Naomi knew she had the woman right where she wanted her. It is rather disappointing to see such talented young heroines showcase such disappointing opinions, Naomi said as she placed her teacup down on her table. However, I can understand and sympathize with you on this subject. I do see my students as an extension to my family and take situations like this very seriously. Check. Inoki calmed herself, taking a deep breath as she stood up to her full towering 2-meter-tall frame. While she seemed to return to her normal stoic-like appearance, Naomi knew for a fact the woman before her was no longer her enemy. We at Shiketsu take allegations of bullying very seriously, Inoki had said evenly, but Naomi could see flecks of red in her eyes when she did it. And while these allegations are disturbing, to say the least, it does not fully explain away the actions of Class 1A. Of course not. Naomi said as she hopped out of her chair to look out the window of the students exiting their dorm rooms and heading over to the first class of the week. But I don't have to explain to you how far one goes to protect not only their fellow heroes but also the ones they love. Checkmate. Inoki paused, her mind clearly going to the image of her wife of nearly 40 years. The former EMT had risked her own life and lost the use of her right arm to rescue an injured ironclad heroine who would be her wife from the aftermath of a terrorist attack years ago. People will go to great lengths to protect those they love. Rest assured there will be consequences for my students' actions, Naomi said seriously. Despite knowing that her girls did what they did to avenge their classmates, attacking fellow hero students on school grounds was against the rules. Indeed, it was something she didn't want a repeat performance of later. For now, at least. But I feel it is in the best interest of our students' development, as well as our school's relationship, to view this as what it is. Not a dark cloud that could potentially hang over their future careers but more of a learning experience. Yes, I can see where you are coming from, the former Iron Maiden said as she retook her seat. Then, finishing the cup of thankfully still hot tea, she had ignored when Naomi had played the voice recording Mirio had taken. Perhaps this can be a learning experience for my girls. Naomi smiled to herself, glad she had made the decision to allow men entry into her school. Things were far more entertaining this way. It was times like this Shoyuta regretted volunteering for this particular assignment. Sure, returning to his hometown after years of moving from place to place sounded like a great idea on the surface. He'd be able to reconnect with the friends he had to leave behind when he joined the military and Interpol soon after that. It also meant he could finally return to that great cat cafe he found during his high school years. The pay raise didn't exactly hurt either. Still, Shoyuta quickly learned that dealing with so many teenaged heroine wannabes was not worth the government paycheck he received. A feeling that only increased after a whole week of not just dealing with his usual problem children, but an entire school's worth of other problem children from across the country. He should have put the effort into getting more than the usual 3 hours of sleep last night. He had a feeling this was going to be a long day. Midoriya, he dryly said, getting the attention of the only other male in the training yard. Kirishima is having trouble with applying her super move to a moving target. Help her out. Yes, sir. The teenaged boy stammered as he moved away from helping out Ashido and Siro and made his way towards the mentioned redhead. He looked towards the whole of his class. They had been acting odd all day. Which was saying something because he had learned over the school year that this particular group of hero trainees was out of their minds and borderline feral. At least in his informed and expert opinion. Growing up with a girl like Hisaha made him an expert in cases like this. His students all seemed distracted, but it certainly wasn't the same reason they were distracted last week either. At least he thought not anyway. Shota sighed at the thought. Friday morning, most of his students were sleepwalking through their classes and spacing out, and distracted during many of their joint training sessions. 72 hours later, they were now wholly crushing, as Hisaha would enthusiastically scream in his ear, their training, and were seemingly smiling the whole day. What the hell had happened after he left campus for the weekend anyway? When you throw your punch, make sure you twist your hips like this. The resident problem child of Class 1A said as he readjusted his classmate's form. The stutter he wore like a favorite shirt ignored as he lost himself in the high of quirk and combat analysis. IT will let you keep your balance while not sacrificing any of your power. After seeing it so many times this year, it was a sight that should have been normal to Shuta's eyes. Izuku helped out his classmate to better their quirk usage. But something was different now. Eiko typically was dedicated, if sometimes an easily distracted student. One who would often put effort into ignoring her own attraction to the lone boy of Class 1A whenever it was time for training. But the redhead was far more affectionate today. She leaned further into Izuku, swaying her hips and almost forcing Izuku's hands onto her hips. He supposed Midnight would call the display youthful, but he was leaning towards inappropriate. Like this? The redhead said coyly, her own cheeks flushed with color as she felt Izuku's body stiffen from the contact. She stretched her arm back, pushing her bust forward in a deliberate manner. One that made Shota think Midnight was being given too much leeway with her teaching style. He wasn't paid enough to deal with this. Kirishima. The homeroom teacher said, his usual tone tinged with a level of confusion that only a handful of people would recognize. Why don't you give Izuku a break and head over to Shoji and Sito for a while? The redhead frowned but listened to his words. She left the boy with a toothy smile before she left, her hands lingering on Izuku's shoulder just a bit longer than was necessary. Shoyuta didn't know precisely the cause of this complete turnaround of behavior his class had been. Still, he had a sinking suspicion he knew who played a part in it. Izuku Midoriya, the problem child, to end all problem children. The boy had seemingly been a part of most, if not every single headache Shoyuta has had since the year had begun. But, by God, Shoyuta couldn't help but feel just a little respect for the guy for the tenacity it took to consistently get on Shita's list for so many things. Not that he would admit it to him, but the respect was there. If there was a cause for his students' change in behavior, he would bet everything he owned that Midoriya was involved. Knowing the young man the way Shoyuta did, he wouldn't be surprised to see that he was the cause of whatever was happening. He'd have to keep a closer eye on his kids to get to the bottom of this. Hitomi Shinso didn't put much stock in rumors. It wasn't like she wasn't a skeptical person. On the contrary, she was, almost to her detriment in many cases. But more than being a skeptical person, one who tried not to believe everything she heard without evidence to its truth. She just didn't care about whatever was being talked about. She often regarded every scrap of information she heard pass through the school's hallways with a level of doubt and suspicion. It was almost a wonder people willingly chose to talk to her about these things. You'd assume they would have learned by now. Heroin school or not, it was a school filled the brim with gossip hounds and overstimulated young adults. After all, stupid stuff was bound to happen, and ridiculous rumors were bound to happen in environments like that. Whether it be the rumor of All Might having a secret love child as a student in school and had only joined the staff to keep an eye on her daughter, whoever it may be. Or a couple of second years claiming they had lost their virginities to Midnight during the school culture festival. Despite the two students knowing zero about, and let's be honest, the fact that someone like the 18-plus heroine could do so much better than a couple of second-year business students. Or even the one about the principal operating an underground fight club where she made ex-villains fight for her amusement as well as their potential freedom. Actually, that one might be true. But no matter what she heard, or how excited her classmates were when they told her, it didn't change Hitomi's feelings on the subject. She just didn't care. Like at all. But then, as the second week of the joint heroic training festival started, those particular rumors began. The entire class, a business student said, her tone of voice carrying equal parts disgust and interest. It was the sort of disgusting rumor that was said about any group with a gender disparity. However, Hitomi had written it off like every other rumor she had heard through the halls of UA Academy. No way was that happening. Especially not with the members of Class 1A and especially not with the freshman heroics class's only man. Midoriya certainly wasn't the type of person who would mistreat those he was close to, especially not in the way everyone was talking about. Besides, if the rumors were true, which again they couldn't be, the rest of the class would be at each other's throats. Of course, Hitomi couldn't say she was much of an expert in the subject. Still, someone stringing along an entire classroom worth of people would create a situation akin to some small-scale wars she had read about in history classes. Midoriya? Hitomi scoffed with a roll of her eyes, not in a million years. But then she had seen certain things that had implications. Long looks held to uncomfortable lengths. Which, Hitomi understood, who here hadn't ever gotten lost in Izuku's eyes whenever he was talking about something he loved. Those things shined like emeralds after all. But this was different. The level of intimacy didn't quite add up to a few friends having an awkward crush on the first boy they ever met. She understood Midoriya had a way with people. Hell, he might have had a similar effect on her after the sports festival, and sure maybe, she felt something for him. But what she was seeing was ridiculous. Seeing Izuku place a comforting hand on Todoroki's shoulder. The shy, reserved ice princess seemed to almost melt from his touch before she slid her hand into his own. Bakugo, the short-fused borderline delinquent nuzzling up to Izuku in the hallway like an overly affectionate cat. In front of the whole student body? That wasn't normal. Wait, when did she start referring to him as Izuku in her thoughts? Oh God, no. Things were quickly starting to spiral out of control, and for once in her life, Hitomi couldn't help the growing pit in her stomach demanding answers. But when one needed answers regarding the latest gossip filling the halls of UA Academy, there was only one place to go. Hey, the pink-haired and skinned heroic student flashed Hitomi $1 million smile. What's happening, Sleepy Beauty? Hitomi had to admit, Mina Ashido looked happy. Like happier and more upbeat than she usually did, which was saying something. Mina always seemingly had an energy about her that was infectious, everyone noticed. She was just so friendly with everyone. But now? She was practically glowing. But that was neither here nor there. Hitomi was here for information, and she needed it now. She debated using her quirk. After everything she had been through with the members of Class 1A, she was sure the pink-skinned heroic student would tell her the God's honest truth about anything she may ask. As long as it wasn't too embarrassing, that is. But Hitomi had to be sure, and there was only one way she could be sure of her answers. Tell me the source of the rumors regarding Midoriya. So she used her quirk, and Mina told her everything. Wow. This might have been a bit much, Hitomi thought to herself. Her face was a blaze of emotion and color as the pink gossip queen of the freshman year spoke a mile a minute, detailing just how the rumors regarding Izuku were born. Her mind was racing as each word left Mina's mouth. Each tantalizing detail that was spoken made Hitomi weak in the knees. Each mind-numbing action delivered made Hitomi grow warmer and warmer until she felt she would burn to a crisp. Hitomi didn't realize just how much she wanted to know what she was being told right now. Whole class, Hitomi muttered to herself as Mina continued on. The pink student's voice was monotone due to Hitomi's quirk usage, but that did nothing to lessen their effect on Hitomi's psyche. She might have told her a bit too much. Hitomi felt lightheaded when Mina described how it felt to have Izuku's scarred hands caressing her with his quirk activated. But Hitomi would be Ed if she felt embarrassed about what she had heard. She was far too busy feeling other things right now. You didn't see me, Hitomi said as she tried desperately to control her breathing, effectively cutting off the pink-skinned hero student right before she described just how large forget I spoke with you at all today. Hitomi rushed forward, almost barreling into a group of freshman Seijin students before she could get away. She cleared the corner of the hallway, just barely hearing Mina expertly calm the irate visiting student down without missing a single beat. Hitomi took a significant intake of breath as she willed her heartbeat to slow down. She knew what she had to do now, and by God, nothing was going to stop her. But first, she had to head back to the dorms to take an ice-cold shower, or she didn't know what she would do when she saw the boy next. He shouldn't have kept a closer eye on his students. Shoyuta sat silently in the teacher's lounge. A fresh bottle of American-style bourbon he had gotten from All Might of all people at their office Christmas party stared back at him, almost daring him to drink it. Oh God, he was tempted. But the school day was far from over, and for some reason, he took his job as an educator somewhat seriously. Which meant day drinking was out of the question for now. After their morning exercises, Shoyuta had forced himself to pay attention to his class, even more so than he usually did. This meant for the first time since he had started working at UA, he decided to forego the yellow sleeping bag that had been the trademark of his classroom. Which meant he was fully awake to see firsthand just how thirsty his class was. Shoyuta grimaced at the words he used. Sure, his students were of legal age. As students attempting to become professional heroes, they were considered legal adults in society's eyes. But as the grown adult he was, his students were still basically children in every way in his eyes. So the thought of seeing them in a UAL light made him uncomfortable and slightly sick. But here they were making goo-goo eyes at the lone boy of his class like he was a piece of meat on display. The lingering stares and light touches. Sly smiles were thrown his way when they assumed their teacher wasn't looking. Mina had been staring at Izuku with bedroom's eyes so much Shoyuta had actually considered gouging his eyes out just to make it stop. He had hoped it was just a few of them. Ochiko was a given, even he wasn't tired enough to miss the apparent crush the girl had. But, thankfully, for Shuta's own sanity, she was too frightened of the outcome to try anything. He even expected Shoko. Thankfully, the girl was so repressed from her poor and sheltered upbringing that Shoyuta almost assumed she didn't even see a boy before Izuku. Mina was also a given. As the class flirt, she was someone who would hit on someone every chance she got just to get a reaction out of them. To think she would take meaningless flirting too far was not something Shoyuta thought seriously about. The less said about Mineta, the better. But no. It was everyone. Every single one. Hey, Izuku. Toru had said as she pulled the green-haired boy close to her. You wouldn't mind helping rub out a cramp, would you? It's just my thighs are so tight right now. Come on, Midoriya. I need someone to practice my grappling with, Ojiro said, her tail wagging in the air as she stretched on the mat.so. Come over here and put me on my back. Hey, Izuku. You wouldn't mind helping me out with my new capture technique? Hana had said, sliding her tape around Izuku's hand and dragging him away. I need to see how effective it is. You wouldn't mind letting me tie you up, would you? Oh hey, Izuku, use some cream on your cheek. Rikida said as she leaned down to whip the leftover glaze of the pastry Izuku had been eating. But, don't worry, I got it. You know how much I love leftover cream. Hey, Midoriya, Sue said, stretching her leg against the top of her chair, how do you like my new knee socks? Had this been happening the whole time? Was he just realizing this? No, he thought to himself, placing the bottle out of sight to avoid unwanted temptation. This was something new. Something must have happened this weekend to explain all of this. Shoyuta closed his eyes in an attempt to clear his thoughts. There had to be an explanation for all this. Shoyuta just had to think about what it was. Shuta's eyes widened as he reached for his phone. There was only one place he could go to get the answers he was looking for. God help him. Welcome to the UA Faculty General channel. This channel allows faculty members to interact online in a casual environment on campus or at home. Keep in mind that while this channel is a conversational channel, it is also UA affiliated, at least internally. With the legal invoice out of the way. This is supposed to be casual and free, and I will stand by that to the end. Have fun. Headmistress Naomi. Shoyuta Aizawa has entered the chat. Shoyuta Aizawa, alright, what happened? Out of this world Shoyuta. Streaming Ginta Thevoid, you finally joined the group chat. Streaming Ginta Thevoid, oh, happy day. One woman flashmob Mike, please don't make this weird. One woman flashmob, you're gonna scare him off. Midnight, what's going on, eraser daddy? One woman flash mob, oh never mind. Vampire mommy show Yuta. Fancy seeing you here. Vampire mommy, oh, Mike, why did you change my name to this? Vampire mommy, change it back. Streaming into Thevoid nah. Hell's Kitchen, what's up, good looking? Hell's Kitchen, what you got cooking? Man's best friend, why are you all so thirsty? It's only Monday. Show Yuta Aizawa, now I remember why I've never used this chat before today. 360 no scope, howdy, partner. What do we owe the pleasure? Show Yuta Aizawa, my kids are acting weird. Show Yuta Aizawa, more than they usually are. Show Yuta Aizawa, what happened after I left campus Friday? 360 no scope. One woman flash mob. Vampire mommy. Hell's Kitchen. Out of this world. Man's best friend. Stone Cold Fox. Power loader. Streaming into Thevoid, well, about that. Midnight, they beat up Shiketsu High. Show Yuta Aizawa, they did what? Show Yuta Aizawa, why wasn't I told about this? Stone Cold Fox, they're my kids Monday Friday. Stone Cold Fox, but my weekends are for sleeping past noon and cat cafes. Hell's Kitchen, those are direct quotes. Show Yuta Aizawa. Out of this world, besides. Out of this world, you had little airy the whole weekend. Midnight, no one wanted to get between you and that sweet little girl. 360 no scope, my heart. 360 no scope, I couldn't stand that thought of that girl disappointed. Show Yuta Aizawa, noted. Streaming into Thevoid, you really should start thinking about getting that girl a mother figure in her life, Show Yuta. Stone Cold Fox, Mike. Power loader, please stop. Vampire mommy, we talked about this. Baby steps. Midnight, baby steps are for cowards. Midnight, go for it, sister. Streaming into Thevoid, listen, Show Yuta, we've known each other for a long time, and I know raising a child on your own can be tricky. Streaming into Thevoid, but if you need any help in that particular field, let me know. Show Yuta Aizawa. Show Yuta Oewa has left the chat. Streaming into Thevoid, cause I know a few. Man's best friend, damn it. One woman flash mob, Mike, what did I just say? Vampire mommy, if you make it weird, you're gonna scare him off. Streaming into Thevoid, sorry. Midnight, don't worry, my sweet little parakeet. Midnight mama, Midnight has a plan. Midnight has invited Emi Fukukadoto into the chat. Midnight joke, I have a proposition for you. Emi Fukukadoto has changed her name to Harley Quinn. Harley Quinn, I'm listening. The UA cafeteria was usually a hub of activity during the lunch period when students of different classes and years could mingle while discussing the recent events of the day. Some would converse with their friends, loudly sharing jokes with one another as they stuffed themselves with the 5-star quality food an organization like UA could supply. Others took the time between classes to make up for lost time regarding missing homework for an upcoming class or last-minute study time for a test or quiz they were nervous over. The week had been a storm of activity regarding the influx of hundreds of would-be heroines descending on their school. Friendships were formed, romances blossomed, and lifelong rivals were born during the first week of the first-ever Interschool Joint Training Festival. All of that was swiftly forgotten, however. As each and every I seemed to gravitate towns the student body of UA Class 1A. No, 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 no. Achiko had shouted, slapping her hand against the table with righteous fury as she stared at her classmates. Just because you knew him the longest does not immediately grant you first date privileges. Why the hell not? Katsuki said defiantly and loudly, meeting the challenge offered to her right as lead in whatever polyamorous relationship they found themselves in. My old hag and Auntie Inko have been planning our wedding since we were 3. I was the first friend he made at UA. Ochiko shouted back, her face mere inches away from the explosive quirk user. And I'm using my best friend privilege. The hell you're not, round face. The blonde said, her hand crackling with small explosions as she glared daggers at the brunette. I've had this called since before you even knew the nerd. The question as to when and how each member of the Class 1A polycule would get their first unknown date with their shared boyfriend was a topic of debate. One that had emotions running high, to the point that it was decided that a special raffle would be held once every member of the group had assembled together. Each class member would be given a number and picked at random until each young woman was given their own individual date. A more structured schedule was needed in the future, of course, to accommodate every member. Still, with 20 eligible candidates, time would be a significant factor. Thankfully, the random raffle would allow them the time and patience to properly discuss each issue given by each member. Despite the agreement, the more competitive class members chose to argue over which number they were to be given. Katsuki, who had declared offhand that she would take number 1 as the woman who knew Izuku the longest out of everyone, was met with derision from the class. None more than the hostility from Ochiko, who claimed the number 1 spot as the first friend Izuku made in UA. The remaining members of Class 1A looked on in silence, either content to watch the unfolding chaos silently or far too busy making bets with one another to see which of their friends would win out in the end. The blackboard behind Hanashiro said Ochiko was the odds-on favorite. Still, everyone knew never to fully count out Katsuki Bakugo for any reason, especially in situations of the heart. It was then Shoko decided to butt into the conversation with her own 2 cents. Considering I'm the first to know about Izuku's secret mother, I think I should be the one who goes first. The declaration stunned the 2 other women, who paused their glaring at one another to look at their scarred friend with shocked eyes. Katsumi specifically made her frustration known. She slammed her hand down with a thud as she stared at the half-plus-half menace in front of her. What the hell are you even talking about? The circle devolved further into chaos as the rest of Class 1A looked on in wonder at the unfolding scene. They've been like this all afternoon, Dio said as she took a seat. Her tray of food showing she had abstained from her usual food staple of junk food and carbonated sugar with a more well-balanced diet of lean protein and vegetables. A dietary change suggested to her by her new boyfriend. Dio sighed dreamingly as she remembered Izuku's strong hands clasping her own during breakfast. He had advised her on how to mitigate the issues her quirk gave her. She could already see a massive difference in her power output, and it hadn't even been a full day yet. Her Izuku was so perfect. And we lost Kaminari, Toru said, snapping her fingers in front of her blonde friend in hopes of waking her out of whatever daydream she had so quickly fallen into. Should we do something? She'll be fine, Ribbit, Tsuyu said as she bites into her jelly-filled pastry. Her favorite jelly-filled pastry that Izuku had made it a point to make sure was stocked in the fridge every time he went food shopping. Izuku really was the best. She's been going in and out like that all day. Can't rightfully blame her, though, Toru said, retaking her seat. I've been on cloud 9 all day long. The members of 1A at the lunch table, currently not daydreaming or arguing, couldn't help but agree. Today may have been the best day of school any of them could ever remember having. The classes were fast and energetic. Their minds seemingly moved faster than they would normally. Even Mina and Doi, girls who had struggled with the academic portions of their school life, had seemingly thrived all day, answering questions correctly and even confidently passing the pop quiz in Present Mike's English class. It was as if the sun had come out and burned away the dark cloud that had hung over them the week prior. A son with green hair and freckles that could melt their anxieties away with a single word of encouragement. Not to mention that was pretty awesome too. Where is the green bean anyway? Rikida sat down at the table, her plate overflowing with the high protein and carbs to maintain her muscular yet curvy physique. I kind of wanted to get a repeat of breakfast, you know what I mean? Howls and whistles met the woman's implication, each and every young woman sitting at the table, counting the minutes down until they could retire for the evening with their shared lover. You do realize there are other people in the cafeteria, right? Ojiro said as she scratched the back of her head. Hot, Sue said, placing a finger to her chin as her thoughts drifted to the past weekend. Ribbit. And I thought I was the only one here who was into that, Toru added, her tone light and mischievous as she tried and failed to get a look of embarrassment to cross the smug frog girl's face. I'm pretty sure I saw him with Tomoyo and Momo, Meiza said. Her tall and statuesque form slid into the seat between the distracted state of a still daydreaming Dio and a preoccupied-looking Minerva tapping away at her laptop. Something about needing his help with some class representative stuff. Makes sense, Mina said with a lecherous smile on her face. Who else is better dealing with student body issues than Izuku? Groans filled the air as each blushing face that was paying attention to Mina attempted to shame the shameless acid user into silence. Actions that only made her cackle and smile even more than she did before. What dark storm of did our prince unleash with you? Her love is shining and sparkling in ways only a woman in love can understand. That is one way to put it, Ribbit. Speaking of which, Hannah said as she slid up to the shortest woman at the table, I'm surprised you're not up there with them, Minerva. I would have assumed you'd be first in line to try and stake your claim or whatever. The short stack of Class 1A hadn't said a word to anyone when lunch had started, far too preoccupied with whatever she was doing on her computer. But, of course, it would have concerned her friends if the ever-present smile had not been on her face. She looked so sincere and at peace that no one seemed to have the heart to pull her out of whatever was holding her attention. Minetta slightly eyed her classmate, still smiling as she stopped the constant typing of her laptop. Of course not, my dear friend, she announced in the formal tone she used whenever she decided to act smug. It doesn't matter if I'm first or last to experience one-on-one time with my boyfriend, as long as it happens. The comment raised a few eyebrows. This was surprisingly mature and somewhat more restrained than many were used to seeing out of the gray-haired heroine. Maybe finally getting the one thing she had been craving for so long had knocked something that was loose back into the proper place. Yeah, Hannah said simply, shock morphing into appetence onto her face. That's pretty mature of you, Minetta. Besides, the lispy voice of Minerva said, ignoring the looks her friends were giving her as she returned to her work on the computer. The convention circuit doesn't start for at least a few months. That gives me more time to plan out all of our couples' cosplays. That's surprisingly wholesome. Koda said, her tiny voice like the coo of a dove as she used her hand gestures to express what she had trouble expressing verbally. I didn't think Minerva could, you know. I would hold off on your words of praise. Mina said as she saw the look of manic perversion seem to grow on her grape-flavored classmate's face. That face doesn't look like it's planning on wholesome cosplays if you ask me. There are laws against going out in public dressed like that, Tokoyami said, blushing furiously as she looked over her short companion's shoulder to see the screen. Dark Shadow nodded her head at her master's words, that barely looks like it would be considered a bathing suit. I know that, Minetta said, turning back to the screen, those costumes are for after the convention when we're back in our hotel room. Well, I just lost my appetite. Jiro said, walking up to the table at the tail end of Minetta's conversation with a pleased look on her face. Hey, Blondie, I managed to get the tickets for the concert. The comment was enough to shock the electric quirk user out of her daydream as a broad and blazing smile erupted onto her face. That's awesome, Dio said as she fist bumped to herself. Tickets to go see my favorite band with my boyfriend. What could be better than that? The surrounding noise stopped, and for the life of her, Dio couldn't help but feel that her life was indeed in danger at that moment. She turned stiffly to her side, ignoring the confused and even betrayed looks on her friends' faces to see death staring back at her. Achiko was still, but like an oncoming storm, the blazing fire in her eyes made it easy to see what was about to happen. While not nearly as upset as her two companions, Shoko had apparently gripped the apple from her lunch plate and squeezed hard enough to leave the poor fruit a chunky mess in her thin pale fingers. Not to mention the twitch in her eyes that made Dio feel she was back in the USJ. Then there was Katsuki. Dio was frozen as her life flashed before her eyes, content in the fact that she at least would not die a virgin if she met her end today. "Oh, calm down." Jiro, the godsend she was, said, her even tone calming the group of angered heroines in training. "The concert isn't for another month, and I got everyone in the class a ticket for it." Momo's treat. As suddenly as it appeared, the anger left all of the bodies. The quickness almost giving the class unnoticed audience whiplash when they saw it. Mina chuckled, her laugh enough to diffuse most of the remaining tension out of the class. She was followed soon by Toru and Hana. After realizing how they had reacted, they couldn't help but be amused by the absurdity of abrupt change of emotions. Mizo shook her head, somewhat disappointed in herself for the unheroic thoughts that crossed her mind. Koda blushed as she tried desperately to hide her embarrassment. Aoyume gave a pointed glare at Jiro, the half-French young woman questioning if the abruptness of the ear-jack user's declaration was done on purpose. The smug look of a cat who ate the canary on Jiro's face making the sentiment that much more plausible. Rikida and Kirishima simply went back to eating their food. The betrayal they felt towards their friend was already forgotten as the truth of the situation was given. Ojiro tried her best to help Dark Shadow get Tokoyami to calm herself down, the resident goth of Class 1A muttering to herself about letting herself fall into the darkness of jealousy so quickly. Sue continued eating her jelly-filled pastry. "Sorry about that," Ochako said, her brown eyes softer than they were a moment ago. "We overreacted." "Most unbecoming," Shoko said. The ice and fire quirk user looking apologetically at Dio and the rest of her class. "Yeah," Katsuki said as she let her anger drift away from her. Her glare remaining on her face but holding none of the fire it did a moment before whatever. Content knowing that was the closest thing to an apology anyone had ever gotten out of the explosive blonde staggered Dio. The electric blonde stood up straighter than before with an easy smile back on her face. "No problem, guys," she said with her usual smile. "I really should have mentioned this, knowing how hard you guys were going. It is my bad." "No, it is not. We overreacted," Achicho said seriously. Her tone was a far cry from the competitive rumble it had been when she was arguing with Katsuki and Shoko. "You didn't deserve to be treated like that." Before Dio could respond with the hug she intended to respond with, something caught her attention. That something seemed to catch the attention of every other member of Class 1A. Then, finally, the door to the cafeteria swung open as 20 individual sets of footsteps echoed in the air. Class 1B entered the cafeteria with a purpose. Looks of determination and resolution plastered on each and every young woman's face as they followed their class representative, Itsuka Kendo, and the copycat quirk user Nada Monoma towards the table occupied by their sister class. "Well," Sue croaked, finishing the last bite of the pastry Izuku had gotten for her lunch, "this looks ominous." Katsuki growled as she caught the sight of the smug look on Monoma's face. However, before anyone could say a word, another sound erupted from the opposite end of the room. As Tomoyo Ida and Momo Yayorozu, Class 1A President and Vice President respectively entered the cafeteria, their faces showing all who saw them that the two meant business. "Okay, what the hell is happening?" Dio said, concisely putting the thoughts of most of her entire class into words. "Did I miss something?" Well, Monoma said, her smug tone doing little to soothe the anxiety of the rest of the cafeteria. Look what we have here. Fancy seeing Class 1A here of all places. This is the cafeteria, Tsu said bluntly, already too tired to deal with whatever Class 1B was trying to do. We have lunch here at this exact time every school day. That's right, Away said, looking like she was priming herself to say something before faltering to the frog girl's bluntness. I didn't think that one through. Hello, Kendo. Momo the redhead said, her voice polite as she stared hard at her counterparts. Good to see you too, Tomoyo-san. While it's always good to see my fellow class representatives outside our class responsibilities, the blue-haired student said as she nodded her head to greet Shota. But, unfortunately, I fear that this is not a friendly visit. You can say that. The redhead student said, her voice serious as she took a step forward. However, I felt it was only suitable to come to you in person to say what needs to be said. And what's that? Momo said, asking the 10 billion yen question that hung in the air. That as of today, the redhead spoke, gesturing to the rest of her class behind her. As well as the rest of Class 1B will be in a romantic relationship with Izuku Midoriya. The room became silent, no one daring to move or say anything in fear of breaking the barely held together peace. Class 1A was stunned, but the eyes of a few held no surprise as they stared at their sister class with barely held contempt. Katsuki had begun reflexively cracking and stretching her knuckles, the desire of a confrontation growing with each second. Unfortunately, she was far from alone, as each member of Class 1A reacted similarly to the challenge before them. The rest of the cafeteria stood stunned. Not only were the rumors of Izuku Midoriya, one of the few male students the prestigious school had ever enrolled, being in a relationship with his entire class true. But now the rest of the freshman hero course students were also interested in the green-haired boy. Many in the business and general studies classes began to reevaluate their opinion on the boy. Many visiting students were left to silently wonder what the young man could do to get 13 promising young heroines to show interest in him. Students of the support class didn't seem surprised, however. Anyone who could get Mei Hatsum to pay attention to anything else besides her babies must have been literal magic. Speaking of which. Yes. The pink-haired hurricane of the support department barreled through the doors Class B had entered through only minutes prior. Her eyes were ablaze with the usual chaotic energy that had become her default during her time at the school. Muscle's brand new hero costume has been approved. So who's ready to see some skin tight? Mei stopped herself from speaking as she walked into the middle of the mob of hero students. Mei's eyes betrayed none of the confusion that dominated the room as she looked at each face that stared at her. Oh wow. She said after a moment of silence. As if she had counted the number of women in front of her in her head. Are there more of you guys today? 'Cause I don't recognize some of you from over the weekend. Thanks for listening to my video. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe and comment below your favorite part. Sayonara, see you in the next video.